The story begins one hot night in the height of summer. A girl was on her usual way back from a walk under a big round moon. A girl with long blonde hair approaching a house stands at the entrance with a man in a dark brown cloak with a hood covering his head. A young man opens the door for them and wonders why Prince Siegfried has arrived. For the girl, this situation was already different from what she was used to. A man with yellow hair and bright orange hair asks the man in the cloak about why he arrived now with his sister, if he was supposed to arrive on a horse-drawn carriage. The man answers him that the reason for his appearance is that he was attacked, and the circumstances will be explained later. The girl listens to what he says with interest, and wonders whether she should play along with Prince Siegfried. Clenching her hand into a fist below, the girl thinks about whether or not she was accidentally reborn in the novella. Reborn in the novella, she met the main male character, a prince with slightly curly black hair. A few hours before, the girl walks through the city at night, the houses with many windows illuminated by a large round moon. She puts her hand to her chest and covers her eyes, wondering if it's summer. She is forced to think about it by the intense heat. As she is walking along, a man in a cloak comes out of the corner with wooden barrels on his sides and runs towards the girl. Noticing the mysterious man crashing into the girl's shoulder, she is very frightened, her eyes rounded with fright. Because of the pain from the blow to her shoulder, she grasps it with her other hand, holding a white handkerchief. The girl asks him indignantly who he is, why he doesn't look around, and what he uses his eyes for if he uses them as jewelry. The girl continues to hold onto her shoulder, which has begun to tingle with pain. She looks at the man standing in front of her and doesn't understand why the blow was so strong if he looks slender. Covering his face with his hand, the stranger asks the girl to leave him, as he doesn't have time to explain anything. However, she is not satisfied with this answer. The girl peeks into the hood to see his face and asks him to wait before leaving to apologize. It seems unfair to the girl that he just wants to leave without apologizing for pushing her. The man ignores the girl and heads forward, trying to get away from the girl, but he fails to do so because she is blocking his way by putting her arms out to the side, making a barrier, trying to draw attention to herself. She doesn't like that the man can't hear her. After failing to apologize, the girl starts yelling at the mysterious man in the raincoat for being too rude to her. Even more angry, she again puts her hands away without letting go of the handkerchief and declares that she will not forgive rudeness in her direction. The man is surprised by the girl's reaction. He starts to walk away again, but he fails again as the girl starts shouting and attracting people, demanding to stop the man and fence him in. In this way, the girl points out his disrespect towards her. The girl is amused by the situation, so she starts laughing while twisting a strand of her long golden hair with one hand. Suddenly, someone starts tapping the girl's wrist with their finger. The man threw a glance with his violet eyes at the girl and grinned, noting that everything happened just as she had said to do. A girl and a mysterious man in a raincoat are increasingly surrounded by a gang of tough men with guns in their hands. The girl, angry either at herself or at the man, guesses that he is being chased, and she did not realize it at once. Meanwhile, the man starts to leave the gang and the girl, drawing her attention to the situation, although he warned her. And while he is angry at the whole situation trying to get away, the girl yells back at him, asking why he couldn't tell her earlier that he was being chased, only to reply that he just didn't have time. The man, without turning around, tells the girl to run away from this place and people immediately. Without taking any action, the girl asks him a question about what he is going to do now. At this question, he turns to the girl. She continues to say something in the man's wake as suddenly someone's hand starts to reach for her head. The bandit grabs the girl by her golden hair and pulls her back, saying he likes pretty faces. At the same time, a man in a raincoat runs up to them. Laughing evilly, the bandit orders his men to eliminate the target in the form of a man in a cape and take the girl. Noticing this, the man in the cloak abruptly turns around and draws his sword from its sheath. Suddenly, the girl shows her fighting skills, and with all her might, hits the jaw of the man who grabbed her and asks the man in the raincoat to leave quickly. The rest of the gang is shocked by what they see and worried about the boss. They rush to their boss and start crying, sitting on top of him, one of them resenting the fact that the girl damaged his brother's precious chin with one blow. Behind them, the girl covers her mouth with her hand and instinctively clenches her other hand into a fist from nausea and stands next to the man, who realizes his help was not needed and puts his sword back in its sheath. The man pulls out a dagger and stands in front of the girl, telling her that she must run and that it would be best to call the guards on the way. The girl stands behind him with her hands clenched into fists and looks towards one of the bandits, who promises that he will avenge his brother. A girl asks a man what she should do if she doesn't want to run away alone. The man, angry at the girl, turns to her and asks her why she takes what is happening as some kind of silly joke. The girl closes her eyes from over-emotion and, grabbing her head, and answers him that she doesn't think it's a joke at all. She clarifies that she just doesn't want to run away alone in such an unpleasant situation, and at the same time, she twirls her finger in thought again. They are again surrounded by bandits who want to avenge their boss. The man raises his dagger in front of him for protection. As his attention is suddenly diverted by a cut on his arm, blood begins to flow from the wound. The girl also notices his bleeding wound and talks about how it doesn't look good. The girl again decides to use her fighting skills and, telling the man that she can handle herself, jumps up high and pounces on one of the bandits. The man in the cloak holds a dagger to himself and watches the scene, shocked. The girl massacred everyone alone and in the process broke the bandits' fingers and hands, then dumped all the bodies in a heap. The man comes to his senses and tries to draw the girl's attention to himself by calling out to her. The girl, hearing the call, turns to the mysterious man and rhetorically asks if he is calling her. The man throws a rough look at the girl with his bright violet eyes, and then replies to the girl that she is the one he is calling for. Looking at a smiling girl with a big red bow on her chest, a man asks her a question about who she is. The girl doesn't answer his question and just starts yelling at the man with her hands at her sides because he didn't say sorry and thank you. She continues to resent him for accidentally hitting her shoulder some time ago and not apologizing even after he was already being chased. The man does not react to her claims, but only stares silently at the girl standing in front of him. Meanwhile, she reflects on the fact that the man ignores her again and does nothing as she asks. The girl approaches the man and with her hand decides to grab him by the throat. She interrogates him about what he is going to do with her shoulder, which she injured while saving him, and how he is going to repay her for her help, not with the money he stole from the bandits. The man is indignant and asks the girl what she is doing. The girl grabs the man by his wrists and answers his question by catching him so he doesn't run away from her without apologizing. A man tries to pull the girl's hand away from him, but he is weak at it. The girl asks him what he was hoping for, walking around in the middle of the night. She continues to look at the man and informs him that she will be going solo from now on. The man is no longer trying to move his arm away from him, but he notices that if you watch the girl chatting, it's obvious that her shoulder is fine. Turning his head a little to the side and taking the girl's hand in his, he clarifies with her again if his assumptions are correct. The girl, without answering anything to the man, looks intently at him, her eyes shining from what she sees in front of her. The hood fell off his head, revealing his dark hair and bright violet eyes. He stares back at the girl, waiting for her to respond. The girl's eyes were so rounded from seeing the men's perfect appearance that she could see his reflection. The girl mentally tries to make herself stop staring at his appearance and move. The man is annoyed by the fact that he is being stared at for so long, and already wanting to put his hood back on, he asks the girl to stop staring at his face for so long. The girl with fright finally bounces away from the man because of such a remark in her direction. With her hand clenched into a fist and her eyes closed, the girl replies to the man that everything is fine and that she is a stranger to regret, but she knows how to be grateful. The girl reflects on the fact that the man is so handsome that she is about to fall and why her heart flutters. The man distracted the girl from her musings with a question about where Eliprit's manor was. The girl asked him if she understood the question correctly. The girl put her hand to her face, covering her mouth, a little surprised that the man didn't know where Eliprit's manor was located. It turns out that Eliprit's manor is the home of this very girl. She takes the man to the manor. They stand at the iron-black gate with gaps, and behind it is a huge white mansion with large oblong windows. One of the butlers guarding the house is standing at the gate, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed over his chest, half asleep. The girl, with her hands on the bar of the gate with a smile on her face, tries to wake up the butler, and at the same time thinks about what a strange coincidence that this man was to be a guest of her house. Having failed to wake up the butler with a calm voice, the girl begins to shout loudly that he finally woke up and opened the gate for them. With horror on his face, the man finally wakes up. The butler is surprised that his mistress is out late at night again. The girl does not want to listen to the questions and asks him to open the gate quickly. The butler is very unhappy with the girl's antics, and opening the gate warns her that if she continues to do so, she will get into trouble and he will have nothing to answer to the Count. Opening them, he notices a strange man in a cloak behind the girl's back, and with a look of horror on his face, asks the girl who it is that has come with her. The man in the cloak stands silently observing the situation, his eyes covered by long bangs. The gate has opened and the man apologizes. However, it is not clear to the girl why the man is apologizing to them. Looking at the man whose face is drenched in sweat, it comes to the girl that he is apologizing for his bad appearance. The butler closes the gate, the shock of what is happening never leaving his face. In the meantime, the girl takes the man into the house, telling him to bear with him a little longer, even if it is hard. She promises to treat his wounds when they arrive at their destination. The butler does not understand what kind of nonsense his lord is talking, and hearing these words of the girl imagines in his head how the Count sees the man rolls up his sleeves and tells him that he is going to treat his face at full speed. He closes the gate and looks at them, wondering if it's possible that he just misunderstood who the man in the cloak was. Already reaching for the mansion's doorknob, the girl asks the man about what happened before he came upon her. The girl turns to the man and notices that his condition is getting worse. She starts to worry. A blonde, angry man opens the door. He calls the girl by name, and it is revealed that her name is Ariel. The man is outraged that his sister has come home late from her walk again. All three of them begin to look at each other. Ariel is amused by the whole situation. The man in the cloak looks at the blonde man who opened the door with a serious look, and the girl's brother is completely bewildered. The blonde-haired man standing in the doorway recognizes the man in the cloak as Prince Siegfried. Ariel turns to the prince in surprise at what she has heard, and tries to see if she is sure that Prince Siegfried is in front of her. A blonde-haired man in a patterned vest asks the prince why he came with his sister Ariel instead of arriving by carriage as promised. Prince Siegfried removes his hood and tells the man that he was attacked on the way and he will explain all the circumstances later. The girl is still in shock that her brother called the mysterious man Prince Siegfried. After they enter the house, Ariel sits in the corner of the room and dreamily reflects on the fact that she has met the main male character not far from her estate. Meanwhile, her maid is trying to reach her. Ariel starts beating her fists and head against the wall because she brought the main male character to her house. The maid starts crying because the girl can't hear her and tells Ariel that it's late. The girl is slightly distracted by the maid, who asks her to get up off the cold floor as quickly as possible. Ariel still turns away from the wall and continues to sit with her legs tucked up on the cold floor. The maid raises the girl's hand so that she can finally get up and go to her room from the landing. At this point, Ariel's tears start to flow, and she looks away from the maid with a piercing gaze as she continues to insist that she should get up and go to her room. The girl becomes even more hysterical and asks the maid what she should do in such a situation with the prince. The maid becomes completely bewildered and asks her mistress what she means. Ariel finished her tantrum and reached her room with a big expensive chandelier and a big bed. Already changed into a nightgown, the girl sits on the edge of the bed in front of the window and thinks about how to sleep with all these thoughts. With a worried expression on her face, Ariel stares at one point and ponders the fact that she can't sleep because of her anxiety. Leaning her head on her arm, the girl tries to remember the exact content of one novel, but she can't manage it, and it doesn't matter how much she thinks. Next to the bed is a small table with a book on it that Ariel read a couple weeks ago, but she can't even remember the details of it. The girl remembers reading many books from the library, but she can't remember all the novels she read in her past life. Ariel continues her attempts to remember what that book was about, revenge, war, or romance, but she doesn't think it was her type. The worried expression on her face has changed to a kind of sadness. Ariel continues to stare out the window and think that fortunately or unfortunately, she has moments that she remembers clearly. These moments are from the story of Prince Siegfried. While the girl was pondering her own thoughts, the man was gazing enigmatically at the sky, leaning on the windowsill. Ariel puts a hand to her face, suggesting that the reason she has memorized the details of this story alone is because of Siegfried's appearance. The story of this young man begins with the fact that the first emperor received a divine blessing and possessed inhuman strength. The emperor had various powers that were passed on to his descendants from generation to generation. But as time passed, the emperor's blood flowing in their veins grew weaker, and their strength began to fade. Suddenly, the ruling family had a child with violet eyes, the kind only the first emperor had. This boy is the main character in this novel, Prince Siegfried. Ariel continues to recall the prince's story. Siegfried is the heir to the throne, born to the empress. Even though he was not the firstborn, he was a thorn in the side of Aisa, Siegfried's older brother, the child of the emperor's concubine. Siegfried had a unique ability to rule the family that Aisa did not have at all, and so the nobles split into two camps. Running through the story in her head, Ariel lies on her back, staring at the ceiling with her arms crossed over her stomach. The crown prince has not yet shown any abilities precisely because of this. They are trying to strip him of his title, but such actions do not suit the first camp. They condemn it. The second camp supports Siegfried on the issue of succession, but in an instant, everything changed. The young empress died. On that day there was a severe fire in the palace that took her life. The nobles who were loyal to the empress asked for an investigation into her death, but the emperor didn't pay any attention to their requests. It was as if he was waiting for this to happen so that he could give the empress's throne to Aisa's mother. Siegfried was only a little over 10 years old when the empress died. Ariel, remembering the details, turns on her side, tired of lying on her back. The story continues with the fact that since then, the body of the empress is known to rest in the county of Blanchi, at Siegfried's relatives on his mother's side. But nothing has changed, as if no one knows the truth. It is clear from history that Prince Siegfried wants to take the throne, but when he returns to the palace, there will no doubt be rivers of blood. The girl slowly begins to fall asleep under the incessant stream of thoughts. She knows that in the original story, she will become the crown prince's bride. Ariel reflects on the fact that she absolutely does not like the power struggle, and from the beginning, she did not want this engagement, and does not quite remember what will happen to her in the story. The girl doesn't want to get caught up in this fight, but she remembers something and covers her mouth with her hand in surprise, and her eyes are around it. She remembers what Siegfried was considering her, and maybe she just has a bad first impression of him. Ariel is even more horrified at the thought that maybe she didn't give the prince a chance without realizing it, even though she saved him and took him to her home. Soon, a week had passed since the beginning of Ariel's excitement over the story, and the very prince who had arrived at their estate. The girl is lying on her bed with her head on her arm, reading a book and thinking about the fact that she has not seen Prince Siegfried with one eye during this week, and she is getting annoyed. In the last few days, Ariel had only seen the doctor enter his room with a suitcase and leave. She closes the book angrily, trying to convince herself that she is worrying about this for nothing, since Siegfried doesn't show up at the manor at all. Suddenly, her thoughts are interrupted by a loud knock on the door. Ariel, dressed that day in a blue shirt and black vest, answers the knock by allowing the person behind the door to enter. A maid bursts into the girl's room, calling the girl "my lady." Ariel looks smiling at the maid and asks her what she wants from her. The girl's books are scattered all over the room, where she tried to find the information she needed. The maid looks around the room, noticing the mess she has made. She smiles sweetly and raises up her hand in which she holds her cleaning tools. In one hand a brush, and in the other a white dust rag. The maid approaches the girl and starts demanding Ariel to leave the room so that she can clean it. Ariel sits on the bed with both hands clutching the book to her chest, dumbfounded by the maid's assertiveness. Ariel tells the maid to wait with the cleaning as she wanted to sit in her room and think about things, and just relax with a good book. The maid kicks Ariel out into the hallway, and looking out from behind the door, and looking at the girl with her bright green eyes, asks her to leave the room and find another place to think and read a book, as she can't put off cleaning any longer. Closing the door to the room, the maid warns her mistress not to even think about coming here before dinner. Ariel continues to hold the book, and resents not being allowed to stay to ponder in her room. The girl goes to look for another place to do her business, and goes outside. As she walks with her thick-heeled brown shoes on the green grass, she mutters to herself that there is nothing better than her own bed. Holding the blue book and a handkerchief in one hand, Ariel, and putting her other hand behind her head, examines the place she had taken to looking for a normal place to think. Looking out from behind the wall, Ariel notices a small greenhouse for plants, and remembers that there is an open area behind the manor, the perfect place to lie on the grass and read. The girl heads to her destination and thinks about the fact that this place is not bad since no one goes here. Suddenly her eyes rounded at what she saw in front of her. Ariel sees Siegfried in front of him. Having dropped his training wooden sword, he looks at his arm. It is bruised. For this he curses his older brother Aias. The girl is concerned about Prince Siegfried's condition. Looking at him, she wonders if he is hurt. Ariel decides that she has come here at a bad time because she heard the name of the Crown Prince Asa and decides not to make him angry. The girl still caught his attention casually though, and Siegfried was distracted from his aching arm by Ariel. Ariel is startled to be noticed and grabbing her skirt fussily curtsies. She starts to smile widely, and since she's been noticed, she decides to say hello to the prince. Siegfried, continuing to hold his hand by the wrist, stands up from the ground and looks towards Ariel, who still can't recover from her surprise. The prince decides to stare at the girl silently and intently, which seems strange to her. Ariel starts laughing and asks Prince Siegfried if he hurt himself and if he's okay. Clenching his hand into a fist, he replies in a gruff tone that he's hurt himself, but she shouldn't worry about that. The girl does not believe him, as she has just seen the man twisted in pain. She hands him her white handkerchief and asks him to at least accept it. Siegfried doesn't want to accept help, and holding up his hand again tells the girl not to pay attention to it. Ariel doesn't like that answer. She doesn't understand how you can respond to people who express concern for someone's life. She's ashamed of him. The prince, ignoring the girl, reaches down to the ground to pick up his practice sword. The girl watches his actions with concern. She doesn't understand how Siegfried is going to train in such a state. The time is nearing evening, and Ariel, watching Siegfried, keeps remembering and reading the story about him. According to the story, the prince will become a swordsmanship genius and even return from the war a hero. Then maybe she shouldn't worry so much about him. Ariel is too eager to read. She decides to observe the prince leaning on his arm. Seeing the prince trying to learn swordsmanship, her eyes rounded with surprise. Surprise is replaced by disappointment. She doesn't realize what she just saw. It's weird and not comparable to the story. In the book, it was written that Prince Siegfried has no equal in swordsmanship, but what she sees is quite the opposite. Covering her mouth with her hand, Ariel said quietly that the prince was not very good at swordsmanship. Siegfried, however, heard this and was greatly angered by this assessment. Siegfried turns to the girl and asks her about what she just said about his skills. She's horrified to be overheard. In Ariel's mind, she starts to think that it was just a rumor and it was an accident. In a panic, she starts to apologize to Siegfried. She rises from her seat and guiltily lowers her head, standing in front of the prince to explain to him that she didn't mean it, and at that moment thinks that she didn't want Siegfried to hear. She said it very quietly. Ariel concluded that he had very good hearing. Siegfried stares at one point for a long time with his wooden sword resting on his shoulder. After pondering for a moment, he replies to Ariel with an angry look on his face that he's not going to accept an apology for such a thing. Without taking her eyes off the prince, the girl apologizes again for apologizing. They stand opposite each other in the evening sunlight. Ariel explains her words by saying that she just heard that the prince should not say hello, and she also thinks that he hurt his wrist. Then she adds that even if his injury is not terrible for him, if nothing is done, it can only get worse and it is worth calling a doctor. Siegfried angrily asks why the girl is so interested in him. Ariel is stunned by this question. The girl tells the prince that she would like to ask him something before she answers his question. Clutching the book in her hands at this moment, she reflects on the fact that Prince Siegfried in the novel is very cold, but one thing she cannot understand. When she finishes thinking, Ariel asks him what she has done wrong, that he treats her badly. She doesn't understand why he's hostile to her if this is the second time they've seen each other in their lives. Ariel assumes that Siegfried doesn't know that in the future she will become the crown prince's bride if everything goes as in the original novella. Sticking his hand in his pocket and not removing the sword from his shoulder, the prince replies that for him to hate her, she has done nothing of the sort. With a smile on her face, Ariel asks Siegfried what's the matter if she hasn't done anything to him, to which he replies that he just doesn't like her. Ariel was surprised to hear that answer, but it didn't hurt her. She asks if there is a reason. Siegfried turns away from the girl and replies that there is a reason, but he was in a bad mood when he saw her at Eliprit's manor. Ariel tries to clarify in what way he was out of sorts, to which she gets a rude reply from the prince, indignant that she will have to explain this as well. The prince decides to explain the reason for his dislike of Ariel. That night, when they went to the manor house, He could not see the girl's face accurately in the street. Continuing to explain himself, Siegfried talks about how when they entered this manor and he could see Ariel in the light, he began to choke and felt nauseous. It turned out to be a terrible sensation for him, and he had never felt anything like it before. That day he was escorted somewhere from the girl by her brother. Ariel's face drooped as she pondered whether the fact that he had felt bad at the time was actually the reason for the reaction. She almost said those words out loud. Siegfried looks at the girl and asks what is wrong with her face. And on their first meeting, Siegfried was indeed out of sorts. But it's still odd for Ariel that he didn't take a liking to her for such a reason. Outraged by this, the girl almost shouting asks His Highness how he feels looking at her right now. Ariel keeps asking the prince if he's nauseous, if he's choking, if everything is the same as the night they met. Dumbfounded by such questioning and reaction to his words, the prince looks at the girl standing before him with rounded eyes. Ariel starts demanding to tell her everything right now without hiding anything, whether or not she also disgusts him. The prince responds to Ariel by saying that for some reason he doesn't feel that disgust this time. The girl calmed down and realized that it was not about the original plot. It turns out that she was worried for nothing, and she felt much better. While she is immersed in thoughts that she was worrying for nothing, as suddenly Siegfried asks for her forgiveness. These words distracted Ariel from her thoughts. She is surprised to hear what he just said, to which Siegfried apologizes again for crashing into her. The girl is very surprised that he apologizes to her a week later. She smilingly answers him by saying that she thinks the situation of the night he crashed into her is understandable. Ariel goes on to say that there was nothing to apologize for, since he was in a difficult situation. The girl asks the prince's permission to ask him what happened, to which he answers her in the affirmative. And what happened was that the crown prince and his brother Aisa tried to poison him that night. Ariel ponders his words. She can't believe that the crown prince tried to poison Siegfried, as he acts as if nothing supernatural had happened, and remembering that she had spoken her previous thoughts out loud, she is glad that no one heard them. The girl tells the prince that he looks much better since that day, and should go out more often. Siegfried sits down on the ground and continues to talk about that night. The prince knew that sooner or later he would make up his mind to do so. Judging by the fact that he was still struggling to hold even a wooden sword, he still hadn't fully recovered from that week. After listening to the prince, Ariel offers to at least wrap a handkerchief around her wrist so that the wound will heal faster. The girl starts to wrap a handkerchief around his hand, but Siegfried resists and asks her to stop doing it. Ariel ignores his request and asks Siegfried not to move. The prince looks at the girl in bewilderment and asks her what she is doing and why. Having stopped resisting, the prince accepts the situation and watches Ariel bandage his palm with interest. Prince Siegfried remarks that this is not the first time the girl has had to do this. Ariel replies that how can she belong to the house of Elipritz and not know how to handle this? She tells the prince that her brothers are knights, and they often have these kinds of injuries, and things like bandaging are a habit, though her younger brother has not yet officially become a knight. Ariel, smiling sweetly, tells the prince that if his arm suddenly hurts, he should let her see it. Siegfried thanks the girl for her concern. She asks the prince if he plans to stay on the grounds behind the house. Siegfried tells her that he plans to stay, but asks her why she asked. To which she replies that she's going to go home since it's getting dark. As Ariel is suddenly surprised, the prince grabs her under the arm and asks her not to leave just yet. Ariel pulls her hand away from Siegfried's, and in bad language tells him that she was very frightened by this unexpected action. Realizing what she has just said, she lowers her head guiltily. Siegfried is stunned at what he has heard, not expecting the lady to say such things, and does not believe what he has heard. The prince asks Ariel what he meant by those words. Before he can say anything, the girl closes her mouth frightenedly and says that it is not appropriate to use that kind of language. Taking her hands away from his mouth, he asks Ariel why, then she says those words if he is not allowed to. The girl thinks for a long time how to explain what she said, looking at the prince with a sad look. Without waiting for her to answer his question, Siegfried takes her hands away from him and asks her to forget he asked. After a long pause, Ariel blurts out the words that the prince is very handsome. Siegfried looks away embarrassed and replies to Ariel that it is not for her to tell him. The girl asks if this means that he thinks she is beautiful, but the prince replies that he does not mean that at all. Not wanting to answer that question, Siegfried hints that she should go home, as she wanted to do a few minutes ago, but Ariel doesn't want to leave until the prince answers her question. The prince asks the girl to leave right now and leave him alone, tired of answering her questions. That night, she found out something very important to herself, that she was beautiful too. Ariel changes into another green corset dress and has her hair tied up. And at this moment, she reflects on Prince Siegfried's words that it is bad for him to look at her. She thinks that the prince does not know anything about beauty. The girl has finished packing and is ready to go out. For the first time in a long time, we're deciding to get out. She comes to a bar at night where men sit at round tables and food is frying behind them. Ariel sits down at the bar and beckons to the owner of the establishment. Suddenly, she notices that she forgot to bring her purse from home. When she approaches the bartender, she asks to borrow a drink. Wiping the glass, he replies that she can borrow the drinks, as she works for the count, so she will definitely pay back the money. Unexpectedly, a hooded man with white hair walks up to Ariel, puts a bag of money on the bar, and says he will pay for her. She turns around with joy in her face and asks the man if she can really drink everything. The mysterious man replies that, of course, she can order anything, but on one condition. Looking at the girl with bright red eyes, he says he wants to talk to someone, and if she would like to keep him company for the evening. After taking alcoholic drinks, they begin to get acquainted. Ariel asks the man his name. He replies that his name is Killian Epelion, and asks the girl a question in return. She gives her full name, but realizes that she accidentally gave her real name, and in an attempt to rectify the situation, shortens her name to L. Killian replies that it's a pleasure to meet her by her full name, but Ariel corrects him to her shortened name. The man laughingly interjects, calling her by her full name. She turns slightly away from Killian, answering him that the joke isn't funny at all. Turning to face the man again, she notices that he is not a local. Killian, looking with interest at Ariel, asks her how she was able to figure it out. The girl raises a thumbs up and explains her speculation that his different accent gives him away. The man clarifies the fact that Ariel works at the Count's estate as a maid. She confirms this and adds that the young mistress is so strict that it is hard for him to imagine how much. As Ariel finishes her drink, she talks about how difficult it is to follow mistress's orders. Killian responds by mentioning a rumor that mistress is very beautiful. Ariel is taken aback by his phrase that this hostess is as beautiful as herself. With a smile on her face, she turns to Killian and talks about how she really isn't disgusting in appearance. Man, clenching his hand into a fist, tells Ariel that he recently heard something. He has heard a rumor that the Earl's estate has recently received a very high-profile guest. Ariel notices that Killian is very interested in the affairs of the Earl's family. The girl thinks to herself that he is digging suspiciously deep and why he needs this information. Taking the bottle of liquor in his hands, the man explains his question by the fact that, in his opinion, many commoners follow the life of the nobles. Ariel does not believe in his words, as indeed many people showed interest when she said that she works at the estate, but not as strong as Killian. And moreover, he is not a local and still knows about the guest in their house. Pouring a drink into Ariel's mug, the man asks if she can leave the manor at such a late hour. The girl tells him that she can leave the manor, but as long as she is not caught doing so. Killian, mentioning that he has heard that the Count has very serious guards, asks her if she is using a secret passage. Ariel responds by telling him that if she tells him about it, the exit will no longer be secret. During this conversation, they hardly ate any food, but drank a bunch of bottles of liquor. Killian notices that the girl is already starting to yawn, and suggests leaving the establishment, as she has had a lot to drink, and is probably feeling very tired. A man holds out his hand to Ariel and offers to walk her home, but she refuses, saying there's no point since she doesn't have far to go. Late at night, they do leave the bar. Killian follows Ariel and insists on seeing her off since it is late and dark outside. Ariel turns slightly toward Killian and politely refuses, saying that pushy men aren't cool. A little upset at being rejected, the man replies that there is nothing he can do about it, but warns that the streets are dangerous at night and asks Ariel to be careful. The girl leaves, saying that she had fun with him and hopes that he will return home without any problems. As Killian turned to leave, a parchment bound with a red ribbon fell out of his pocket. Ariel notices this and bends down to pick up the package and asks the man to stop because he dropped something. Killian turns around to pick up something he dropped and asks Ariel to give the note back, as it is very important. But she does not listen to him and unties the red ribbon and unfolds the paper. She is shocked by what she sees, as there is a portrait of Siegfried Afterwards, she smiles sweetly and apologizes to Killian for looking at the contents without asking. Holding the note in her hands, Ariel explains to him that when she picked it up, the ribbon had come undone, so she's going to retie it. After tying the note back with red ribbon, the girl returns it to Killian. And before he leaves for his estate, he says goodbye to the man and thanks him for paying for all the drinks and food. Turning away from him, the smile from her face sells, and her fists clench into a fist from fear. She doesn't understand why the note was a portrait of Prince Siegfried, and why Killian would want it. Clutching the portrait paper, Killian looks in the wake of Ariel fleeing into the house. When the girl arrives at the manor, she goes to Siegfried's room and tries to wake him up to warn him of possible danger. Ariel starts knocking on the door. She still manages to wake up the prince, and he asks who is knocking so late in his room. The girl says her name and reminds him that she gave him her handkerchief, and they talk to him a lot. The prince asks to wait. Ariel, tired of standing, squats down while waiting for an answer, and thinks that Siegfried is not the time to relax, as a suspicious person is looking for him. She is sure Killian wants to find him, but the question is, who the mysterious man really is. Finally opening the door in a half-asleep state, Siegfried asks Ariel if she knows what time it is. The girl knows from Siegfried that he lost his money and his retinue on the road, and he also said that he borrowed a small amount of money from someone, and thanks to that he was able to get to Priest Manor. Based on this information, Ariel assumes that perhaps Killian gave the prince the money, and that it makes sense why he is carrying Siegfried's portrait and trying to find it. Perhaps he is just a loan shark. Ariel sees an irritated prince with disheveled hair, half-closed eyes, and a sad expression on his face. She answers smiling at what time it is, and adds that it isn't the prince's bedtime. Siegfried assumes that the girl woke him up because it's too early for her to go to bed, and closes the door with an angry look on his face and drives her to sleep. Ariel blurts out that it's not what he thought. She pushes the door open sharply to stop the prince from closing it and asks her to listen. Siegfried is outraged by this action and asks her what she is doing and why, for she could have been badly hurt because of this carelessness. After getting Siegfried to keep the door open, Ariel reminds the prince that he told her how he borrowed money before coming to the manor. The prince, not fully awake, stands silently listening to what Ariel tells him. She adds that she met a very strange man in the tavern today. Siegfried closes the door and tells her to go to bed as the girl is drunk. Ariel still tries to say what she wants to say and asks to listen, as she has been drinking, but is not drunk at all. Ariel goes back to her bedroom and changes into her pajamas. She is angry that Prince Siegfried didn't listen to her and sent her to bed. She thinks that Siegfried does not look like a man who is not nice, but she is uncomfortable with his indifference. Ariel notices that Killian has been pouring her a drink, but hasn't had a drop himself. While she was thinking about this, a hooded man crept up to her window and watched Ariel sitting in a tree. Unable to hide quietly, he made a loud noise that the girl heard. Hearing a noise outside the window, Ariel turns around sharply and asks frightenedly who is here. She walks to the window, dragging the hem of her nightdress behind her, and tells the man who is hiding to show himself before she calls the guards. The window opens and Killian climbs in, covering Ariel's mouth with his hand. Without removing his hand from her mouth, he touches his finger to her lips, hinting for the girl to keep quiet. Ariel takes Killian's hands away from her and asks him to let go, and only then can they talk normally. The man begins to laugh at these words. Ariel responds to his chuckles in a gruff tone by saying that she doesn't see anything funny in it. With a surprised expression on her face, she looks at Killian standing in front of her and asks him why he is here. With a hand on his ear, the man asks a counter-question about what Ariel is doing in the Countess's chambers if she is only her maid, according to Ariel. Outside the window, there are voices saying that the murderer has gone in the direction of the mansion and asking others to be more careful in their search. Climbing back out the window of Ariel's room, the man tells her that they will see each other again, and then they will discuss what they didn't have time to do today. Killian jumps off the second-floor balcony of the mansion, while Ariel shouts his name, wanting to say something, but not in time. The man then hides from Ariel and the people who are looking for him amongst the trees of the garden. The two men look up to the girl and ask if she's all right, as a suspicious man has snuck into the manor, and they saw him heading towards her balcony. Holding the cape with one hand, Ariel replies that she is fine, and points in the direction of the man they are looking for. The men thank Ariel for the information and go off to search further. Meanwhile, she thinks that it is useless to search, and Killian has probably already escaped, and maybe she should have at least tried to stop him. Finished looking out the window, the girl turns away from him and notices the blood on the wall. In the morning, Ariel wonders where the blood came from, since when they met Cyril at the inn, he was fine, which means he was injured somewhere on the estate, but the knights couldn't find him. She decides to ask her brother Abyssian about it. A maid bursts into Ariel's room, and noticing the blood on the wall, is horrified and shouts out a question as to whether the killer has injured the girl that night. Ariel smilingly replies that the blood on the window is not hers, and asks the maid to clean it up properly. As Ariel descends the stairs, she asks the servants where her brother is at the moment. She is told that the young master is with His Highness Prince Siegfried. The girl thanks her for the information. Ariel stands outside the door and hears the voice of the prince and her brother. Siegfried says confidently that what happened during the night was the work of his older brother Isa, and asks if there are any more wounded. Abyssian replies to the prince that thank God the rest of the people are all right. Peering harder out of the door, Ariel wondered if this was about Killian. The earl sadly lowers his head and tells the prince that it is unfortunate that no one has been able to see the face of the murderer because the knights have missed him. Siegfried replies to the man sitting opposite him that he hopes that further investigation will lead to some clues, and casting a glance at the doorway, says that perhaps the man who stands behind the door and overhears their dialogue will tell them something and asks them to come out to them. Ariel marvels at Siegfried's keen hearing. She appears at the door and wishes good morning to her brother and prince. The count asks her angrily what she is doing here. The girl answers her brother saying that she would like to tell something about the events of this morning, as it seems that the murderer was her drinking buddy Killian. The count is shocked to hear such news from his sister. Placing his hands on his knees, Prince Siegfried asks Ariel to come through and sit down, but her brother does not understand such a request. The prince tells him that she seems to have something to tell them, given what she said earlier. Her brother began to ask her what happened, when and how, why she started leaving the estate again, and if she was hurt. He literally flooded Ariel with questions. The girl asks him to slow down and ask her about everything. At the same time, the prince asks Ariel if her drinking companion seems suspicious. Ariel began to narrate from the moment the mysterious man introduced himself as Killian Epelsian, his height just over 189 centimeters, bright red eyes, and silver hair. She goes on to talk about how at the inn, Killian asked a bunch of questions about the estate, and he had a portrait of the prince's. She feels like it's likely the man already knew who she was. Sneaking into the manor, he found her but did nothing of the sort, not mentioning the fact that he grabbed her head and covered her mouth. Ariel adds to his story that Killian was chased by the guards, so that afterward he immediately fled and was not caught. After hearing the story, Siegfried tells Ariel that she could have been hurt, and if he had listened to her, then none of this would have happened, and thinks it is all his fault. The girl responds by telling him that the prince is in much more danger than she is, and she is glad that Siegfried listened to her at least now. Putting his bandaged hand to his chin, Siegfried tells Ariel that this is not the first time this has happened to him, and that there is nothing wrong with it. And moreover, he has been awake since her arrival, so he has not been taken by surprise. Siegfried shows his wounded arm and adds to his speech that his wrist was the reason he couldn't beat Killian. Ariel replies that she thought that Siegfried had hurt Killian that night, and then in that case he could have been sent to him by his brother Isa. The prince confirms that Isa did it, as he is the only one who wants him dead. Siegfried apologizes to Ariel for causing her trouble. The count asks the prince not to say so, because nothing is more important than the safety of His Highness. The girl confirms this and asks Siegfried to cheer up. Siegfried thanks Ariel and her brother for the nice words, but he still caused their problems. Raising his hand, the prince shows on it where he left a deep cut to Killian, so they won't see him for a while. The count notes that it is not accurate information that Killian will not go to them, so he is going to put guards on Siegfried for additional protection. But the prince replies that he can defend himself. He assures Sir Abyssian that there's no reason to be so worried about him. After listening to Siegfried, Ariel looks at him admiringly. The prince looks back at her and smiles a very warm smile, then tells the count that it is his sister who needs an escort, as she has seen the attacker's face, and therefore it is clear that she will be hunted by his enemies. Ariel asks not to worry about her, as she can take care of herself. At this point, she thinks about the fact that such protection is not beneficial to her, as it will be difficult for her to get out. Siegfried advises not to give up the guard's protection, as he's really worried about the girl's safety. She denies that she needs protection, but the prince insists that she does. Ariel wonders why he thinks she needs protection. After finishing his tea, Siegfried puts the cup on the table and asks Ariel not to be stubborn and just agree, because if something happens to her, he will be responsible. Ariel tucks her hair behind her ear and agrees to be guarded, but only until Killian is caught. Siegfried glances approvingly at the girl and then thanks her that because of her warning during the night, they were able to avoid the worst and the prince is still alive. Ariel is amused by this gratitude, as she did not think she would ever hear Siegfried say that. The prince turns away embarrassed and asks the girl not to smile and asks her to leave as he has finished his dialogue. A girl sits in her room and contemplates while several maids clean her room. Resting her head on her arm, she thinks about the fact that since Killian's attack, Prince Siegfried has been very focused on his health. Ariel is bored sitting in her room and decides to go to the landing. There she continues her musings. Because the prince has taken care of his health, they have not seen each other for 2 weeks. Leaning on the railing, Ariel starts to cry because she can't go outside because of the escort and can't admire Siegfried's beautiful face. She can't understand why life is so hard, but she is sure that if she waits a little longer, there will be a holiday on her street too. On this day, the annual Ellepritz festival begins. At this festival, there will be a hunt for mythical sirens, so everyone drinks and eats well. Ariel is sure to cheer herself up. A blonde-haired young man in a blue suit comes out of his room and is surprised to see Ariel standing on the landing outside his room. He is the youngest son of the Ellepritz family. His name is Miliad. Ariel asks him in return why he is at the manor, if she has not spent all the money on her games again. He answers her that today is a loss and tomorrow will be a win. Ariel asks him to tell her straight up what he's forgotten here. After she stops listening to Miliad, the girl is distracted by the maid and asks if her dress for the festival is ready. The maid tells her that it is ready and that she is not of high birth. Ariel is delighted and replies that it is exactly what she needs. The Count and Prince Siegfried come down the stairs. Hearing the dialogue, the prince asks what the festival is about. Ariel's brother explains to the prince that it is a festival in honor of the search for sirens. Siegfried replies that he has heard of it, I think. The girl looks at the prince and offers to go with them since he's already home all the time and never goes out. The prince rejects the idea because he doesn't like noisy places. Ariel is not surprised by his refusal, as it is hard to imagine a man with such an indifferent face enjoying the atmosphere of the festival. The girl offers her brother to go with her, but he refuses as he has a lot of work to do. She has no choice but to go there alone, since no one else wants to go, and tells them that she will find other handsome men there. Miliad reminds Ariel that countesses don't go to such events, to which she replies that the poor have no say in the matter. Ariel's brother asks her to stop the altercation. Smiling and crossing his arms over his chest, the Count replies that they will go to the festival as representatives of their family, and not to party. Ariel resents that they will not be allowed to enjoy the festival, to which her brother replies that they will have free time to do so, and asks her not to forget the escort. The girl doesn't want to be guarded since it's a festival. Fixing his shirt, Siegfried reminds Ariel that she will have to go with an escort until Killian is caught. The girl, with her hand under her hair and sad eyes, replies that she does not need protection, as she saved Siegfried when they first met. The prince does not want to listen to her excuses, and tells her that she needs an escort and has something else to add. Distracted by the prince, Ariel interrupts him about what else he wants to say. Siegfried takes his eyes off the girl and, having changed his mind, replies that he will not add anything. Ariel notices that the prince has a terrible habit of not finishing and parodies his recent phrase. The prince angrily asks her not to repeat it. Behind Ariel stand Count Abyssian and Miliad. Watching the situation, they cover their faces in shame for their sister. The girl ignores this and again decides to parody Prince Siegfried's manner of speech, to which he replies that he doesn't speak like that. Ariel finishes the dialogue and says goodbye to everyone that she will go to the festival before the sun goes down anyway. Her brother Abichion waves to her and tells her to be careful. The festival site is furnished with tents and decorated with triangular garlands. People walk, drink and socialize among themselves. Arriving at the venue, Ariel thinks about when the festival will start as she is tired of waiting. One of the guards tells her that there are 2 hours left and that she has to wait a little longer. Ariel thinks about the fact that she won't be able to have any fun because of this escort. With a sly glance at the guard, she asks if she has much time left. She is told that she does. Ariel asks the guards to wait here while she changes clothes, because she won't do it in public. The guards agree to let her go. The girl is changed into the clothes of a commoner and is musing aloud that she almost died of boredom. She's been waiting for this festival for a very long time. She peeks out of the tent to check the situation and decides now is the time to go. While the guards stand with their backs to the tent and talk amongst themselves, Ariel manages to escape from them. She rejoices in running with her hands in the air as she now has 2 whole hours of freedom. Realizing that the Countess is in the tent for too long and does not answer them, one of the guards decides to check the tent, but sees no one there. On the small wooden table is a small note left by Ariel. The guard picks it up off the table and starts reading it. It says that they don't have to worry about her, because she'll be back before the festival starts and she'll be fine. After reading the note, the guards start yelling Ariel's name very loudly. Meanwhile, the girl hiding under a modest outfit wanders among the alleys and thinks that she has wandered to the wrong place, as there are very few people here. In the meantime, guards are looking for her all over the area. Ariel notices them and thinks that 2 hours have passed and she should go back. She finds it strange why these knights from her family are in this strange alley. They're discussing the prince among themselves. After hearing their dialogue, Ariel tries to figure out if they are talking about the prince and what is going on, since Siegfried said he will not come to the festival. While she was listening to the knights, some man passing by grazes her shoulder. She apologizes for not seeing him and interrupting. She looks up and sees 2 tall men carrying something very heavy. One of them turns toward Ariel and gives her a stern look, squinting his eyes. The girl realizes that something is wrong because there is nothing in the direction they are going with that strange bag on their shoulders. After not much thought, Ariel's eyes rounded with fear as she thought of something terrible. The men head at a fast pace to a dark and hidden place with a huge sack of flour or potatoes, but it is so heavy that even the 2 of them can't carry it. Ariel is standing behind them, watching them, and thinking that this is definitely not what she expected to see at the festival. The girl is trying to figure out what's in that huge bag if it's so heavy. Suddenly she notices a hand tied with a handkerchief taken out of the bag. Ariel covers her mouth with her hand in horror, realizing that it is the same handkerchief she gave to Prince Siegfried as his body is being dragged in the sack. Hearing a small noise, the man who is dragging the bag turns back but sees no one. Ariel manages to hide behind the corner of one of the houses while continuing to cover her mouth. She's not sure what's going on, but she doesn't think she's going to sit still and thinks about calling the guards. Not letting the suspicious men out of her sight, Ariel thinks that there is no time for inaction in case she misses them again, as it happened with Killian. Meanwhile, sitting on a rooftop watching the girl is the same red-eyed man named Killian. Ariel decides to climb a tree and watch them from the top. She assumes that if Siegfried is really in the bag, it is unlikely that anything terrible will happen to him, as he is a prince and the main character. But he is definitely in danger, and so she needs to save him. One of the men tells the other that the boss is coming soon, so that's it for now, and they can go. The other suggests going out for a drink. His partner agrees, and they go to the festival because they're sure to get a drink there. Ariel stands under the roof of the building and waits for the 2 men to finally flee the scene. When they finally leave, Ariel goes to the barn where the sack with the prince has been thrown. A huge iron chain hangs on the door. The girl notices that they have locked the door well, and it cannot be opened without the key. Then she decides to find another way out. Ariel notices that there is a window at the top, and if she climbs on the bags, she will reach it. Climbing up the heavy sacks, the girl manages to climb through the window into the barn where Siegfried was taken. As she descends, she realizes that it looks like an entire warehouse, and she can hardly see anything because of the dust and darkness. Ariel asks if anyone is here, but no one answers. As she passes the haystack, she politely asks someone to respond. Suddenly her gaze falls on Prince Siegfried. He's lying on the ground with his hands and mouth bound. Ariel comes closer to him and kneels down, asking if he's okay. The prince doesn't answer. Ariel is worried that he is unconscious as she can hardly carry him herself. She has no choice but to hit him to make him wake up and apologizes to him in advance. It works, and Siegfried regains consciousness. Ariel is happy to see him awake, and with a smile on her face tells him that she thought she would have to hit him harder. The prince asks Ariel where they are and what happened. The girl replies that she wanted to ask him the same thing and find out who kidnapped him. Siegfried lowers his gaze and answers that he only remembers leaving the house with Myliad and then eating a cookie and passing out. Ariel interrupts the prince and apologizes for this. However, she is not happy that he refused to go to the festival with her, but went with her brother Myliad. Siegfried asks her to take off the ropes so they can talk properly. The girl asks him to thank her for having the dagger. Cutting the rope, Ariel tells the prince that she is really hurt that he said he doesn't like crowded places, but he went to the festival without her. She's also resentful because the prince hates her and Myliad loves her for some reason. After hearing Siegfried's claims, he tells Ariel that she's the reason he went with the million. Siegfried clarifies that he means that if she had asked him again, he would have agreed to go with her. The girl is surprised by this answer. While she was trying to cut the rope around the prince's hands, there is a noise near the door. Ariel turns around startled. Killian stands in the aisle holding an oil lamp. He tells Ariel that this is the third time they have met, and it seems to be fate, as it is as if she is pushing them together. Siegfried orders Killian to shut up and asks him about whether the Crown Prince of Isa has hired him. Siegfried looks back at the tall man standing before him with an angry expression and listens intently to what he says. Killian tells the prince that he didn't want to admit that he was hired by Isa and offered a lot of money for his head, so he has to die. Siegfried continues to cut the rope with his dagger to free his hands and tells Killian that the knights of the Elipritz family are already looking for him and Ariel, especially since he is already conscious. The prince adds that he just needs to hold out until they find them. Killian laughs that Siegfried naively thinks their guards will be able to stop him. Moving closer to Ariel and Siegfried, the man asks them why they think he chose this particular place and not any other. Killian points to the fire, meaning a kerosene lamp in his hands, oil in buckets, and a bunch of bags that will burst into flames in a second. Pointing all this out, he interrogates the prince and Ariel to see if they now understand his plan. Smiling evilly, Killian adds to his words that Siegfried will burn here today and disappear without a trace, and with him the plans of the second heir to the throne. Killian holds out his black-gloved hand to Ariel and asks her to come over to him. He explains that he likes her, so he's going to save her life. Ariel reflects that she will have to listen to what he says, because if she is mean, he might do something to her. Before approaching Killian, the girl looks at the prince with a sad look. At this time, Killian has already prepared to burn the barn. Ariel decides to approach him. The man pours a bucket of oil on Siegfried, while the girl watches in horror with her hands over her mouth. The prince turns his face aside to keep the oil out of his eyes and mouth. His hands are still bound and he is covered in oil. He rudely asks Killian about how much his older brother paid him for his head. The man asks the prince if he wants to bargain in such a situation. The prince tries to guess how much he was paid, mentioning amounts ranging from 100,000 to 1,000,000. Killian replies to Siegfried saying that he has almost guessed the amount. Lowering his gaze to the ground, the prince talks about how ridiculous it all is. He didn't realize his life was so cheap. Raising his eyes to Killian, he offers him 10 million, but he will have to kill his brother Isa. Killian explains that they won't be able to make a deal, since he has already received 3 of the 10 diamonds out of his million. Ariel, standing behind him, is surprised at the amount. Siegfried explains that if he becomes king, all the mines will also become his property. The prince adds that Killian does not need 10 diamonds, because if he ascends to the throne, he can give him 100 such diamonds. Smirking, Killian replies to the prince that this offer is already more of a bargain than the past. However, he wonders if there is a guarantee that Siegfried will become king, so he is not going to risk his life for nothing. The crown prince has the support and respect of the noble families, but Siegfried is only hiding and on the run, which reduces his chances of taking the throne. And continuing this theme, the man adds that he is sure that everyone in this country wants to see the first prince as king, and Siegfried's words sound like utter nonsense. Besides, no matter how high the price is, he's much easier to kill than the first prince of Isa. Having untied Killian's hands in secret, the prince replies to him that there is nothing else to do then, but to do as planned. Still, this time is enough. Ariel, not realizing what is happening, watches Siegfried's actions in surprise. The prince rises from the ground holding Ariel's dagger, which he used to free his hands from the rope. Killian is angry that his plan failed, and Siegfried was able to free himself. He throws an oil lamp on the ground next to the prince so that it breaks and starts a fire. Siegfried skillfully dodges the lamp flying at him. It falls and shatters. The barn begins to burn. The prince begins to attack Killian, trying to defend himself with a small dagger against the man's long sword. Watching the battle, Ariel thinks about the fact that last time Siegfried had trouble even holding a sword, but this time he's skillfully fighting with a dagger. It's like a buff male protagonist. At this time, Killian angrily tells Siegfried that he should have killed him right away. As if mocking him, the prince confirms this and remarks that Killian has wasted valuable time like a fool. Siegfried manages to pin the mercenary against the wall, leaving him no chance to resist. Then with all her might, she kicks him in the stomach with her knee, making him weaker. Killian begins to scream in pain and gets up from his knees to hold onto his stomach. As the building continues to burn, Siegfried shows his strength and tells Killian that the outcome is clear and asks him if he wants to fight him next. Killian throws his sword to the ground, raises his hands up to show that he has surrendered, and asks the prince with a sly smile how much he promised him for the head of the crown prince of Assa. Siegfried decides to change his mind and tells Killian that it is up to him to kill his brother, which has been clear to everyone for a long time. The man smirkingly asks the prince about what he needs from him then, if not to kill Aisa. Siegfried crouches down on the ground and picks up Killian's sword. Leaning it against the man's neck, he asks him to work for him from now on. And continuing to point the dagger at Killian, he adds that if Aisa hired him, then he's capable of a lot. Killian comes to believe that Siegfried's words were empty about killing Aisa. The prince confirms this and mockingly says that Killian was a fool to fall for it. Siegfried says that in 2 weeks he will be participating in a monster hunt and Killian will have to go with him. Without lowering his arms, the man is stunned at being tricked and at such a strange request. Afterward, Killian tells the prince that he is too expensive a specimen for him as an assistant. Siegfried glances sideways at the man and reminds him that he has just tried to kill him, and that he should not forget who is the reason he is still alive. The prince adds to his words that he needs a companion to be with him on the hunt. At that moment, Killian puts the sleeping hood back on his head. Ariel walks up to Siegfried and tells him she's glad he's all right. The prince gives the girl the dagger, saying that she will still need it, and asks if she always carries it with her. Taking the dagger from his hands, Ariel explains to him that she only takes it with her when she goes out for a walk out of boredom. They head out of the barn. Ariel keeps talking about how she usually hides the dagger under layers of dress and offers to teach the prince how to do it. He refuses, as it makes no sense, since he doesn't wear dresses. Killian, standing behind them, watches them leave and later declares that he is lost and asks him to wait on the exit. As Ariel walks outside, she notices some strange fire and people in the distance. Behind the bushes stand the guard and Miliad. The young earl notices the prince. The other is surprised that they managed to find them. Miliad joyfully runs at full speed to meet Prince Siegfried. Tired of running, he crouches down on his knees and looks down at the man, apologizing to him for daring to let him out of his sight. He explains that he's searched the whole village but hasn't found him, and he's already thinking something bad. Ariel rolls her eyes irritably. Siegfried replies to Miliad that he is fine and asks him to get up off his knees. A young man, noticing that the prince's clothes are dirty, asks him what has happened to him during this time. Siegfried turns away and replies that nothing has happened. Miliad glances at the girl and asks her why she was with His Majesty, noting that her clothes are dirty too. Ariel panics and looks away, finding it difficult to answer his question. Siegfried looks at the girl's face and notices that the explanation is not easy for her. With her hand behind her head, Ariel finally decides to tell Miliad that they just met by chance, and she was showing him around, and that it's okay for her to change clothes. Miliad puts a hand to his chin and thinks to himself that something is clearly not as they say it is here. Ariel pushes both boys to go to the festival, because if they just stand in the woods, it will be over. Miliad gives a thumbs up and asks the prince to change his clothes, but he refuses as he can just shake off the dust. It's already dark outside. The festival is still going on, and various food vendors continue to sell on the street. After a while, Ariel comes out of hiding in a beautiful beige dress and tells the prince that they are already late for the festival and offers to go there and have fun. The prince asks her what she means. The girl explains to him that they are at a festival, which means eating and laughing. Siegfried asks him not to explain further what the festivals are about, as he already understands their atmosphere. Ariel asks him how he could understand the atmosphere of the festivals if he was always with Miliad. The prince replies that this was enough for him, but the girl asks him not to make her laugh with this, as the first festival must be memorable. Clenching his hand into a fist, Siegfried asks Ariel if she is not afraid to have fun like this, because it is possible that someone else might want to kill him. Not wanting to listen to excuses, The girl reminds the prince that he has already dealt with one of his brother's mercenaries, so there should be no problems, and she also believes that Siegfried will win this battle for the throne. Siegfried tells Ariel that he doesn't think all of Isa's mercenaries will be as stupid as Killian, and suddenly next time he can't handle the enemy, suddenly she'll get hurt too. The girl looks at the prince with one arm around herself in bewilderment. Siegfried asks her how she is not afraid of it, which is very strange to him. Ariel, after listening to the prince, asks permission to ask him one question and answer it honestly. While jabbing her finger into Siegfried's forehead, Ariel asks him in a very serious tone if he wanted to go to the festival with her and just waited until the welcome performance was over. The prince roughly removes the girl's hand from his and almost shouts at her, telling her that he didn't want to go to the festival with her. Ariel doesn't believe it and suggests that Siegfried is just ashamed that she recognized his true feelings for her. Siegfried covers his mouth with his hand in embarrassment. Ariel is angry with the prince and keeps telling him that she is afraid that if he is alone, he will be attacked, and that they will take him to some deserted place again, and adds that she is not going to sit idly by. Lowering her gaze to the ground, Ariel asks Siegfried to stop overthinking these things and go have fun with her already. She holds out her hand to him and beckons him to come with her next. Not thinking long, the prince agrees to go with her to the festival and have fun. First, they decide to stop by the bake vendor and choose what they want to buy. Ariel and Siegfried end up settling on a selection of chocolate chip cookies, having scored a whole bag of them. The next place they visited was a jewelry store with a large selection of rings and earrings. Ariel looks around the assortment and shows the prince one of her favorite pairs of earrings. Heading to another place, they wade through a large number of people, and Ariel apologizes to everyone who is too hurt to go on. The prince notices that there are so many people at the festival that he and Ariel are temporarily separated in the crowd. Stepping out of the crowd, Ariel turns to Siegfried and offers to take her hand. The prince is indignant at the suggestion, as it seems strange for him to take a strange man by the hand. Ariel replies that she is not happy about it either, but if they don't do it, they will get lost among people. After a little thought, Siegfried agrees to the proposal and extends his hand to Ariel. In order not to make him uncomfortable, the girl takes the prince by the wrist and asks him if he would be comfortable that way. The prince replies to Ariel that this is more than normal for him, and holding hands, they go off to explore the festival further. Ariel suggests that Siegfried go see a puppet show. Once there, they see two dancing puppets on stage, one in the form of a girl with golden hair, the other in the form of a man in a tuxedo with black hair. Siegfried looks at what is happening on the stage with admiration, and Ariel, watching the puppet show, thinks that the prince is like a child. Siegfried turns to the girl and thanks her for helping him survive. Ariel asks him what he's talking about. The prince clarifies that he thanks her for saving him and for not telling Miliad what happened. Ariel explains that she didn't tell her brother anything because she saw that he didn't want to, but she doesn't understand why. Siegfried looks off into the distance and replies that he doesn't want to make her family worry, as he'll be leaving soon anyway. He adds that this is unlikely to be his last confrontation in his life, so he doesn't want to put them in danger because Ariel could get hurt because of him, and so he thinks it's better for her to stay away from him. Ariel is outraged by this, because if she hadn't found him, it could have been irreparable. She tells the prince that if he has a hard time and needs help, he can just ask for it. The prince responds by saying that the most important thing is to survive and then to protect others. But Ariel insists that in difficult moments, you need to rely more on others, and asks him not to make up excuses, because she is a lady from the Elipritz family and is not going to just sit nicely when such things happen in the world. So she asks him not to be afraid to ask for help even if it's hard, and assures the prince that they'll get through whatever happens. Ariel notices that the prince is only 15 years old, which means he needs adult help. Siegfried, angry at these words, asks Ariel not to pretend to be an adult. After calming down, the prince asks the girl if she will help him if he is in danger. Ariel confirms this and adds to her words that she will not run away but will come to his aid so that he can escape from Ace and become the first ruler of this country. After finishing the dialogue, they continue to watch the puppet show. At this time, Prince Siegfried is pondering something with his hand to his chin. Ariel notices this and asks him if he has anything to say to her. The prince replies that he doesn't. After thinking about it, he asks Ariel what she wants for her help to him and points out that she can ask for anything. Ariel replies that she hasn't thought about it and jokingly says 10 million elks. It has been a difficult day for them, but for many it has brought joy and pleasure. The next day, Ariel walks out of her room in a lush floral dress and reflects on the fact that she is very tired from yesterday's outing. Along the way, she meets her brother Milliard, dressed in a black and white suit. He starts flattering Ariel about how beautiful she is today, and how beautiful she is. The girl realizes that her brother obviously wants something from her and asks him to stop complimenting her and get to the point. Milliard asks Ariel if she remembers Baron Helix, since she used to see him. Ariel replies that she remembers him, since he and Milliard are two peas in a pod in the money games, and asks her brother what he wants from her. He asks her to meet Baron Helix because he played him. Ariel refuses and sees no reason why she should do it for him. The young man explains that she will just have to have lunch with him. Ariel asks her brother if he has accidentally decided to cover his debt in exchange for the Baron's date with her. Milliard confirms his sister's hunch. Ariel doesn't take long to smile and clench her hands into fists and swing for her brother. Milliard, frightened, asks her sister to use words instead of hands. The girl does not like the idea and asks her brother how he is not ashamed to use his sister in such a way. Protecting his head with his hands, the young man asks Ariel to calm down, as he only wants her to go on a date before she gets old. Not out of combat readiness, the girl angrily asks her brother, since when Baron Helix is considered a man if he is 3 years younger than her. Milliard proposes to her sister to get engaged to the Baron, but Ariel flatly refuses the proposal. Milliard doesn't understand why she refuses and asks for a reason. She tells her brother that she already likes someone, so she can't go on a date and get engaged to the Baron, and thinks to herself that she must be careful that Milliard doesn't catch her in a lie. He grabs his sister by the shoulders and asks her if she has met a handsome and rich man over 190. Ariel the dreamer replies that it's a secret and she won't tell him anything. While Milliard is trying to find out from his sister who she likes, Prince Siegfried comes out of the room. Ariel asks his brother to get away from her. Because of this reaction, Milliard assumes that there is no one his sister likes and that it is all an excuse. Ariel turns around and notices the prince standing behind them, and she gets the idea to tell her brother that Siegfried is the one she likes and points him out to her brother. The prince at this time is watching bewildered and doesn't understand what is being talked about. Not letting his sister out of his arms, Milliard gets angry and yells that he knew there was something between them and that he was sure they were doing something indecent in the bushes on the day of the festival. Ariel pushes her brother away with her palm on his head and tells him that he shouldn't even think about dragging her into any trouble anyway. Milliard reproaches her sister that she should be ashamed of herself since Siegfried is only 15 and so is he. The prince finally decides to ask them what is going on between them. Milliard asks Siegfried what he has done to make his sister fall in love with him. Meanwhile, the prince is stunned by this statement. Ariel is amused by this situation and, covering her smile with her hand, looks at the prince and talks about how his highness is so beautiful. Lowering his head and holding it with the palm of his hand, Milliard says that even if they are in a relationship, he has already made arrangements with the Baron to meet with him, and he needs to pay this debt. The prince asks him if the debt is about gambling. He replies that he didn't want to go that far, but that he can't pay it himself. Ariel looks angrily at her brother and hopes that the prince will not agree to help him with this. She is very annoyed with the whole situation. Crossing his arms over his chest, Siegfried asks Milliard in a serious tone if he should pay his debts himself. With her head down in shame and disappointment, Milliard walks away from her sister and the prince and asks for their forgiveness since they are all right about this. Ariel turns to Siegfried and tells him that she made up this story about loving him to get away from Milliard, so don't even think about it about liking him. Covering his eyes, the prince tells her that he didn't think anything of the sort. Ariel smilingly tells Siegfried that she's glad he didn't believe it, since he's not her type at all. The prince blushes at this statement from Ariel and shouts at the whole manor that she is not his type either. Siegfried stayed at Eliprit's manor to increase his influence and get rid of Isa's influence. But he still continues to ignore Ariel. For days she hasn't seen his face. She herself tried to come and say hello, but Siegfried just turned around and walked away from her in the other direction. Ariel walks through the garden holding her white dress and ponders why the prince is avoiding her, if she has explained to him that he is not her type. Probably so that no rumours will spread. But why should she if it is not true? The girl notices Abyssion's brother and the prince practicing with wooden swords on the lawn. Ariel, holding her head, asks them what and why they are doing this since it's so hot outside. The brother explains to Ariel that they have to prepare for the hunt. The girl asks him if the prince will also participate. Siegfried answers the girl and confirms her words. When she hears the prince react to her question, she asks him indignantly if she exists for him again, because for the past few days he has been pretending that she is nothing and allowing himself to ignore her. Turning his head to the side, the prince answers Ariel saying that it never happened. Watching her sister and the prince, Abyssion begins to laugh at them. Abyssion throws his wooden sword to his sister and tells her that if she's also participating, why don't she practice too? Otherwise she'll lose all her skills. Ariel catches the sword and agrees to practice despite the heat and the dress she's not comfortable wearing. The prince turns to the count and asks him if Ariel is really going hunting. Abyssion confirms this and adds that his sister is stronger than any knight in his guard. Ariel slings her training sword on her shoulder and smiles proudly. With a hand to her chin, Siegfried offers to test her skills in a duel. Ariel reflects on the fact that she's already seen the prince's skills once, and considering he was able to defeat Killian, they're incredible. She gets into a fighting stance and asks Siegfried not to use too much force. Ariel realizes that she is not weak either, but she does not know if she can defeat Siegfried. The prince asks the girl not to worry, as he only wants to test her fighting skills, not kill her. Abyssion approaches the prince and his sister and puts his hand between them to give the command when to start the fight. He sets the terms. Whoever lets his sword out of his hand first loses. The count removes his hand to indicate that it is safe to begin. Ariel and Siegfried point their wooden stoves at each other, each hoping to disarm the other. Ariel notices that the prince is giving in to her, as it feels less difficult given his strength. She notes that she sees his every attack, but maybe that's because she's seen him in battle. The girl blocks the prince's attack, and thinks that it is clear to her that Siegfried cannot be weak, since she has seen his real strength. The pressure makes it harder for her to hold the wooden sword. Even giving in, the prince still manages to disarm Ariel, and she falls to the ground, dropping her sword beside her. Siegfried holds out his hand to her, offering to help her get up off the ground. She agrees to his offer and draws her hand to him in return. She notices that Siegfried has been very insistent on ignoring her, and now he just gives her his hand. The prince explains to her that this is a different situation, without letting go of her hand. Ariel clarifies how this situation is different from the others. He looks away embarrassed as he blushes and says that the atmosphere was very different. The girl notices that the prince does not let go of her hand and asks him to let go. Siegfried did not notice how long he held her hand after helping her. He pulls it out abruptly. Regardless, he still thanks Ariel for fighting fair and asks how she was able to fend off all of his attacks. Ariel replies that she herself does not know the answer to this question and asks the prince if he is trying to create a new scandal in their home. The girl talks about how they might be misunderstood since they haven't met, and then why ask such questions? The prince irritably explains that he didn't ask her that way at all. He meant that it was like she was reading his every move. Tucking her hair behind her ear, the girl reminds the prince that she has already told him that she feels nothing of the sort for him. Siegfried asks her why she keeps repeating it. Ariel turns away from the prince and talks about how she's just repeating it for no reason. They haven't met, and she doesn't love him, to which the answer to everything is no. The girl walks up to her brother and tells him she's heading home, and that will be the end of the training. Siegfried grabs the girl's wrist and asks her not to leave. Abyssion notices that he is an extra, and smilingly informs them that he suddenly has a lot of things to do. The prince asks Ariel about who her type is, if not him. The girl's eyes rounded at such an unexpected question. Since the last time they had met, she had just said so. She didn't understand why the prince was reacting this way. She asks the prince if he has fallen in love with her by accident, but Siegfried denies it and asks her not to think anything of him. Letting go of Ariel's hand, the prince says he just wants to know the tastes of his subjects. Not thinking long, the girl still decides to name the signs of the man of her dreams. He should be handsome with a height of 190 centimeters or even higher, very rich and smart, and that the belly was not, the body to be taught, and he must take care of her, love and help. The prince, after hearing this, replies that this was too detailed a description of the type. Siegfried excuses himself again and asks not to think anything of him since he's just curious about it. Ariel smiles and tells him she hasn't thought about it and doesn't intend to. The prince turns away from the girl and reproaches her for always ruining his mood with her words. She decides to ask him why he thinks so. Without answering anything, the prince turns around and walks away towards the mansion. The girl looks at him and wonders if she has crossed the line in their relationship, but she is sure that Siegfried is very upset with her. All the nobles from the south stay at Eliprit's manor in preparation for the hunt, and it has become a tradition for a long time. All the racers prepare the estate before the guests arrive. Ariel each year has all the responsibility of housing the nobles and their guards in the house. On the first day of their arrival, a welcome banquet is held prior to the hunt itself, and all arrivals can enjoy it in peace. But since the Elipritz family takes all the responsibility in the preparations, Ariel is always very busy for days on end. The day of the banquet is coming. In a large hall there is a heap of noble guests, dressed up in expensive fancy clothes, men with epaulettes on their shoulders, women with fans. On this day, Ariel chose to wear a long red dress with gilded embroidery. The girl walks past the guests when one of the noblewomen notices her and asks Ariel how she is doing. Ariel notices that they have not seen each other for a year and answers her question by saying that she is fine and asks her a counter question. And while Ariel was greeting and chatting with all the guests arriving at their estate, at this time, a grey-haired man is watching her. The man turns out to be Mr. Manuel. Ariel immediately greets him. The man is surprised that she recognizes him immediately, even though they haven't seen each other for 3 years. The man praises the job Ariel did, noting that she did a great job with the reception. Not far from them stands Prince Siegfried dressed in a blue and white suit with a red cape and epaulettes. Manuel notices him. Meanwhile, Ariel is thinking about how handsome the prince is in that costume. Siegfried decides to approach Abyssian and Miliad, and standing between them looks intently at Ariel. Meanwhile, the girl continues to talk to Mr. Manuel and tells him that it is time to finish, and suggests that he talk more tomorrow. The man agrees with Ariel because he is very tired. The Countess sends Manuel to his chambers, telling him that she has chosen an excellent room for him. The man agrees to leave the banquet and promises to see her tomorrow. Before leaving, Manuel asks Ariel if she will be free tomorrow afternoon. Meanwhile, Prince Siegfried continues to watch them from afar. The man manages to offer Ariel a walk together, and at that moment the prince moves towards him and pushes him in the back, and after pretending as if it came out by accident, apologizes for his clumsiness. The prince stands up to Manuel and apologizes again, explaining that the collision was due to a small space, adding that it was an accident. The man smilingly replies that he thought nothing of it and forgives Siegfried. Holding onto the shoulder of the prince, Manuel asks Ariel again if she will go out with him tomorrow. Siegfried reminds the man that it seems he was about to leave for his chambers. The prince looks angrily at the man standing next to Ariel, not listening to what the prince is saying behind him. Manuel wants to offer something after the reception, but doesn't have time to say it. Siegfried kicks Manuel in the back and apologizes again for kicking him, as he says the floors are very slippery. Ariel watches in horror. Manuel, sitting on his knees, responds to the prince by saying that if he slips like that again, his bones will break. The prince rudely refutes this by saying that bones do not break so easily. Ariel is sure that the prince is kicking Manuel on purpose. Pointing his finger at Manuel's door, Siegfried rudely reminds him that it is very late and wishes him a good night. The prince again casts an angry glance at Manuel and offers sarcastically to hold the door for him if he has trouble walking. With his hands up, the man replies to the prince that he doesn't need help. Frustrated at being kicked out and not being allowed to speak, Mr. Manuel lowers his head and heads for the exit. The prince waits until Ariel's acquaintance leaves and tells her that this man is nothing like her ideal. Ariel explains to Siegfried that she never thought of him that way. The prince replies that while she may not have thought of Manuel that way, he certainly did. Ariel indignantly asks the prince where he got this information from. Siegfried tries to answer, but he can't even get a word in edgewise. The girl notices this strange behavior. She asks Siegfried if he has been drinking. The prince denies it, looking languidly at the girl. She realizes that he is definitely lying to her. She realizes why Siegfried is acting so strangely and reproaches him for it, mentioning the fact that he is still underage. Ariel asks him who poured him a drink. Unable to stand properly on his feet, the prince sits down on the couch holding his head. Siegfried replies that her brother did it. Miliad holds up her wineglass and smilingly confirms this. Ariel calls her brother a jerk and has her fists ready to take revenge. Siegfried grabs the girl by the hem of her red dress and asks her not to leave him. The prince stops Ariel and tells her that the man is not what she wants. She turns her head to him and reminds Siegfried that he has already told her that. Turning to Siegfried completely, Ariel adds that Manuel is not her type at all and has not even considered a relationship with him. The prince leans back on the red sofa and holds his head, asking himself why he is so tired. The girl reminds the prince that he has been drinking and then asks him if he has made friends with any of the nobles today. Covering his mouth with the palm of his hand, Siegfried tells her that he's been friends in general, but seeing her with that man makes him furious and asks Ariel not to get close to him. With a hand on her cheek, Ariel asks the prince why she should stop talking to Manuel if she and he have been friends since childhood. The prince struggles to explain the reason and manages to say only an incomplete phrase like a declaration of love. Siegfried passes out due to the amount of alcohol in his system. Ariel leans over and tries to wake him up, but she can't. She finds nothing new in this situation and notices that the prince is acting like a child. The next day comes and the nobles are gathered again, but this time around a long dinner table. Abyssian, sitting at the head of the table, raises a glass of red wine and tells everyone that he hopes they all finish this year's hunt quickly. He notes that last year they didn't have many noble guests. One of the older men at the table raises his glass and tells the count that last year he had to stay on his own land and look after the province's affairs. But luckily, this time they were able to come. The woman sitting across from the man doesn't let him finish and asks him rudely if he just decided to flash his highness. Ariel, meanwhile, is sitting at the communal table drinking wine and thinking about how pissed off the rest of the nobility is at her. She glances at Prince Siegfried sitting across from her. He is thinking about something of his own, looking away. Someone decides to ask him how he is feeling. Ariel remembers how drunk the prince got last night, and Abyssian had to carry him on his shoulders to his chambers. The prince is joined by her brother Miliad. Ariel notices that Prince Siegfried has become close friends with the family during his stay at Eliprit's manor, but it's only right that he should make connections. Overall, the prince seems to her a very intelligent and interesting young man, and she doesn't think it would be a bad idea to be friends with him, as he could be like another little brother to her. Ariel notices that Siegfried is staring at her and begins to stare back at him. Siegfried turns away and starts talking to Miliad. The girl doesn't understand why he was staring at her, and now turns away. A man with a brown haircut sits next to her. He draws Ariel's attention to himself and begins to praise the food at this reception. The man asks the girl if she cooked it herself. Ariel denies it, saying that all the food was prepared by their cooks. The man then speculates that Ariel made the menu herself. She confirms his speculation. A man bowing introduces himself as the Count of Ferris, and extending his hand offers Ariel a walk with him. She looks back at the prince before answering, but he doesn't look at her and continues to talk passionately to her brother. Ariel holds out her hand to him in return, agreeing to the offer to walk with him. She gets up from her seat and heads for the exit. Siegfried, distracted from the conversation, notices Ariel leaving the party with a man. Ariel and the Earl of Ferris stop on a stone platform behind the house, surrounded by trees. She just stands next to the Count and looks up at the star-studded night sky and realizes that she finally feels some freedom. Ariel rolls her eyes when she hears the Count ask her if she's exactly 20 years old. A man sits down on one knee in front of her and asks her to marry him, holding her hands at that moment. Ariel throws up her hands in anger and asks the Count about why he's so suddenly suggesting this. Leaning his hand against his chest, the man replies that he has been waiting for this moment for a long time, and this decision may be sudden for Ariel, but not for him. She thinks to herself in that moment about what he's doing. Ariel regrets that she did not immediately refuse the offer to walk with him. The Count of Fairs asks permission to kiss her hand. The girl refuses and asks him if he has heard of her ideal type of man. The Count looks up at Ariel and tells her that he has heard about it, but thinks that in life she will change her mind after talking to him. The entire South knew of her standards of beauty for a future husband and groom, but of course there were those who ignored her wishes and sent letters of engagement, but Ariel rejected them all. Not that she didn't want to, for she was really at a good age for marriage, but these sudden offers of marriage are not to her liking at all. And there's nothing in the graph that Ariel looks for in a man. But after meeting Siegfried, all other men seem different to her. Ariel tells the Count that she would rather go back. The Count tries to stop her and asks her to accept the offer, since he already knows that she will have one daughter and 2 sons with him. Ariel doesn't understand what nonsense he's talking about and politely smiles and gestures a refusal. The balcony window is suddenly opened by Prince Siegfried and asks Count Fairs in a gruff tone what he is allowing himself. The Count and Ariel turn around at the sound. Ariel is shocked by the prince's intervention in the situation. The Count asks the prince if he heard their conversation. Siegfried denies that he was eavesdropping. The Count wonders what the prince is doing here if he didn't hear their dialogue at all. Looking at the man from the second-floor balcony, the prince asks the man to withdraw his engagement proposal. The Count resents this slightly, as it is a private matter between him and Ariel. Putting his hand to his chin and turning his head to the right, Siegfried tells the Count that Ariel has confessed her love to him. He adds to his words that Ariel said she couldn't find a man as beautiful as him anywhere else. Ariel doesn't understand why the prince does this. She doesn't remember it. Of course Ariel has complimented him, but not this kind of compliments. Siegfried again talks about the girl's feelings for him, and mentions that she once supposedly said she would wait until he was old enough. Ariel clutches her head in bewilderment. The Count turns around with a surprised look on his face and asks if this is true. Ariel raises her hands and denies everything the prince has said. Hearing this, the prince again reminds Ariel that she confessed her love to him before her brother. Siegfried seriously asks the girl if she likes to play with men's hearts. He then turns around to leave and asks to wait while he looks for Miliad to confirm his words. The Count of Fairs runs away from the shame of what happened, covering his face with his hand, apologizes to Ariel, and asks her to forget about his proposal. The girl tries to stop him, but nothing comes out. The Count has fled, and Ariel glances at the balcony, where a satisfied Siegfried is still standing. Covering his smile with his hand, he says that he has gotten rid of the Count. Ariel asks the prince why he is doing this to her by interfering in her life. The prince explains that he only saved her as she needed help. The Countess tells him that it was wrong, even if she did say so. Ariel asks the prince about what he will do if there are rumors that she is in love with him. Turning around, the prince tells her that if she is so worried about the consequences, she shouldn't have lied to his brother about her feelings for him, so it's too late. The girl asks him what late means, to which she gets the answer that late is everything. Ariel is angry with Prince Siegfried and wonders what's wrong with him, as he used to blush at a touch or a joke, but it's clear to her that he's going to get her in big trouble. The next day of the great hunt is coming. All participants from the very morning begin to prepare themselves and their horses for it. Their hunting uniform consists of a blue shirt with a red collar, the same colour belt, brown pants and white gloves. As Ariel walks past the other contestants, she notices Manuel. He wishes her a good morning. The girl notices that Count Fairs did not say anything about yesterday, since the rest of the nobles are still freely chatting with her. Ariel turns back and spots the very same Count. He runs off in the other direction, frightened of her. Yesterday, Ariel had concluded that she should be more careful with Siegfried, and hoped that he would no longer blab about her feelings for him. Behind her, she sees the prince in a slightly different uniform. His shirt is black. Ariel notices that he is very handsome indeed, but now this beauty does not seem as pure as before. Siegfried silently walks past her. Ariel doesn't understand this behaviour since he's been talking about her taste in men for days on end, and now he just ignores her. After a while, all the participants in the hunt dismounted on their horses and set off. Suddenly, Ariel hears someone's voice behind her saying that he didn't expect to see her here. This man turns out to be Killian. She had completely forgotten that he now works for Siegfried. Her brother Abyssian didn't really like the idea, but Siegfried convinced him that it was for a higher purpose, so the former had to agree to it. Anyway, Ariel seems like a strange idea to turn her almost killer into a sidekick, but that's how it ended up working out in the end. Ariel says not to worry because she will be a great help, and thinks that everyone will have a hard time without her. Killian notes that this is a very self-righteous attitude. The girl clenches her hand into a fist and tries to prove the opposite and draw attention to her muscles. The man replies that he takes her at her word and asks her to let go of her fist. Ariel realizes that Killian can't be trusted in any case, as this man is willing to do anything for money, so he is always ready to betray them. She decides to just be on the lookout. She is interrupted by a man asking her if there is an easy way to catch sirens and asks her to tell him if she knows. Ariel indignantly asks Killian why he keeps talking to her. He tells her that the reason is that he doesn't know anyone else here. Killian clarifies if he and she are drinking buddies. As they get even closer, The man tells Ariel that they may not get along, but they are definitely right for each other. Reaching out to her, Killian adds that they better stay close on this hunt. Ariel pulls his arm away from her and asks him in a gruff tone what he's letting himself in for. Killian wasn't too hurt by the reaction, explaining his actions by saying he just wanted to be closer to her. Ariel clarifies with the man about whether he really thinks she doesn't understand what he's up to, and again asks him to stay away from her. Having travelled a small part of the way towards evening, Abyssian suggests we take a rest stop, take a break, and head onward. The Count explains that there is only one day left until they reach the village of Court, and from there, their goal is not far away. Ariel listens attentively to what her brother has to say. Ariel is excited that they will soon arrive in the village of Court, as she missed their local grapes. She admits to herself that she agreed to participate in the hunt for one reason: to taste the famous grapes of the village of Court. These berries in the garden are delicate and pleasant to taste, and are produced in small quantities, so they are very valuable. After her first monster hunt, she was treated to one in the village, so now Ariel always looks forward to that moment. Raising your clenched hand into a fist, Ariel promises herself to become even stronger for the sake of the grapes. Afterward, she approaches her brother Abyssian and asks if she can eat elsewhere on the lawn holding a woven basket. The Count asks his sister why she doesn't want everyone to eat together. Ariel explains that she would like to eat in a quiet place, all by herself. Her brother wishes her a pleasant appetite and lets her go. As Ariel leaves, she thinks that she would rather die than be with Prince Siegfried. She sees people under the tree and decides to go to them, although there are a lot of people there at first glance. But the place should be found. Ariel greets them and asks if they like it here. The men greet the lady in return and ask why she is asking. Ariel explains to them that she only wanted to ask if she could join in the meal and shows her basket of food. One of the men with grey hair allows Ariel to sit down with them as they are honoured. The girl thanks them for it and takes a seat on the grass with her legs tucked up. An elderly count asks Ariel if she is dating someone at the moment. The girl chokes on the question and replies that she has no one in mind. Ariel doesn't finish her sandwich and puts it back on her plate. The man asks Ariel if she would like to go meet his other son, as he thinks they would be a good match. A young man with bright red hair sitting next to him asks the man if he really thinks the lady would be suited for a man with the title of Earl. Then he offers Ariel dinner with him, but she separates the distance between them with her and replies that she doesn't have time for that. In the south, the Elipritz family has the most influence and power. As Ariel is the only daughter of this family, many young aristocrats try to woo her, but she is not interested in them and only bothers her. Upset that she is being offered herself and her sons, she walks away from this company to another distant place under a tree where Killian sits alone. A man notices Ariel and asks her why she came here if she said she didn't want anything to do with him. Ariel explains to him that she's not here for him. Killian asks Ariel why she came to where he is sitting. Ariel explains her actions by saying that other people are afraid to approach him. The man thanks her for the compliment and asks Ariel if she feels the stairs directed in that direction. The girl does not turn to Killian and rudely replies that she feels the stairs and asks him to be quiet. After lunch and rest, they set off again. Ariel rides next to Killian, as luckily for her, the aristocrats never dared to approach her. Killian asks Ariel again about how easy it is to kill a siren. She explains to him that you just have to stab them in the heart. Ariel asks the man not to start a conversation with her. Meanwhile, Prince Siegfried notices the way they talk and draws his own conclusions in his head. Late in the evening, they decide to stop for the night. Abyssian asks everyone to remove their luggage and tells them that they will set out tomorrow morning. Stretching her arms, Ariel tells Killian that she can finally sleep in a comfortable bed. A small boy approaches her from behind and asks Ariel to follow him. The girl asks him to go somewhere. The boy explains to her that whoever sent him asked him not to talk about it. Ariel remembers that the boy is from the Abyssian family. She asks him again what he means. Ariel sees 3 men behind the boy, one of whom is Prince Siegfried. She becomes angry at the situation and asks the boy to tell them that she doesn't see the point of going there. And without letting him finish, she sends him away. The boy goes to the pole where the prince is standing and then immediately returns to Ariel. He tells the girl that the person who asked him to call her insists that she come anyway. Ariel gets angry and rudely asks him again who he's talking about. The boy explains to her that if he tells her who it is, she will not come to him. Ariel asks if it is His Highness Prince Siegfried. The boy casually confirms it. Killian turns away at this time as he begins to laugh at the situation. Ariel asks the man what is making him laugh so hard. She turns to the boy and with a smile asks him to tell the prince to come in an hour at the appointed place. Clenching her hands into a fist, Ariel decides that they need to talk and clear up what is going on between them. After an hour, the prince and Ariel finally meet in a field surrounded by trees. They stand opposite each other at a great distance. Ariel dares to ask His Highness why he is acting this way. Siegfried clarifies what he did wrong. Ariel reminds the prince that he asked her to come here and everyone knows it. She aggressively asks him again to explain why he's doing this to her. The prince dares to ask Ariel about her relationship with Killian, and if they have been friends since when. He wonders what's going on between them, since it's the first time he's seen Ariel since that day. She listens to him with her eyes downcast and smiles slightly. After listening to the prince, the girl tells him that what he is talking about is not important to her now. Siegfried closes his eyes and tells her that it is important to him. They continue to argue, Ariel asking him why it's so important to him and if he's going to get in her way again. The prince doesn't like the fact that she and Killian spent the whole day together. The girl explains to Siegfried that nothing happened between her and Killian. The prince asks Ariel if she is telling the truth. She tells the prince that he may be attracted to older girls at his age, and because she is so beautiful and stands out so much, he may have fallen in love, but he should not behave like that. First of all, because she does not like it. The prince is in tears due to his mixed emotions, and in order not to show it, he turns away and tells Ariel twice that he doesn't like her. Ariel is angry at Siegfried's reaction, because it's obvious he likes her, and it's easy to assume that. She doesn't understand what's wrong with his face, since she hasn't said anything bad to him, but he acts like she's the horrible person. Siegfried tells Ariel that it was not easy for him to disturb her either, and maybe he overreacted a bit, so he wanted to make up with her all day, but she avoided him all day, and yesterday the prince only thought he should help her. Ariel asks if he was just trying to help. Noticing the prince's embarrassed look away again, she realizes something is wrong, because no one acts like that when they just want to help. Ariel tells Siegfried that she almost fell for it, and not to think that such a trick will work again, and asks him to stop playing with her. The prince rolls his eyes at her words. The girl asks Siegfried again about why he gets involved every time a man approaches her, since all she wants to do is marry her ideal man. The prince is convinced he's done a good job because he doesn't think he'll ever be ready to see Ariel with another man. Ariel looks at the prince in surprise, asking him if he likes her, since it seems that way based on his actions and words. Siegfried blushed at the question. Ariel asks the prince if he wants to propose to her. She can see why the prince acted that way when any of the men tried to get to know her. Siegfried is still uncomfortable looking into her eyes. He asks Ariel if she wants him to tell her straight. The girl confirms that she wants to hear everything with her own ears, and he adds that if he continues to keep quiet, he'll come off as a juvenile who bullies someone he likes for no reason. Siegfried raises his eyes to Ariel and asks her if she will accept if he asks for her hand and heart. Ariel shows a cross with her hands and replies in a serious tone that she will not accept such an offer from him. The prince asks her why she refuses, if she can never know what might happen to her appearance, condition and stature while growing up, and adds the question of whether she has ever met any man who fits her needs more than he does. Ariel notices that the man in question is a man, and Siegfried is still just a boy, albeit a handsome one. His beauty is like a rose in the garden. She likes to look at it, and that's it. At this point, Ariel presents a grown-up version of Siegfried. She reminds the prince that her ideal man should be at least 190 centimeters tall. The prince clenches his hand into a fist and reminds Ariel that he is still growing. The girl agrees and reminds him that if he wants to grow big, he needs to go to Dreamland. Siegfried tells Ariel not to think that at his 15 he is still a child. She answers that he still has a long way to go and asks not to bother her, as she wants to live a quiet life and let him find another bride, because there are many beautiful girls of his age in the world. Or wait 5 years before asking her to marry him. But then he thinks there's no guarantee she won't be married by then. Siegfried is upset that because of his age, Ariel won't give him a chance. It's too much for him. And he says there's nothing he can do about it. Nothing he can do about the fact that he's attracted to her. After he turns around and leaves, but before he does, he asks her not to think that he's just going to give up. He won't give up until her feelings for him warm up, at least a little. Ariel looks at him and thinks that his words mean that Siegfried will continue to bother her in the future. But what he feels for her is not right, and tries to understand when she got into his heart. After the monster hunt, Siegfried will be poisoned on the Eastern Front, and then the battle for the throne with Isa will enter a new phase. On this basis, Ariel decides to put up with his antics, as there is not much left, because if she again with him, she will never see him again. The next morning, everyone starts getting ready for the hunt, and has already changed into their brown specialty suits. Ariel comes down the stairs and notices that everyone is excited about the upcoming hunt for the sirens. She reflects on the fact that the chance of dying at the hands of the sirens is slim, but during such a hunt it is natural to get seriously wounded. Sirens are dangerous magical creatures with the face of a human, the body of a bird or fish, and incredibly sharp claws. They have a special power to seduce people, making them unable to defend themselves, so you can't look them in the eye or listen to their singing. There are a lot of carrion-eating crows flying around in their habitats. Fighting these dangerous creatures is a real challenge. All the participants have gone down to the lobby and are waiting for instructions. Count Abitione stands in the doorway and informs everyone that the preparations are complete and they can leave. They should all return safely for dinner. Everyone is excited that it's finally hunting day and time to hit the road again. Ariel clenches her hand into a fist and makes a promise to herself to compete for the grape court. She turns her attention to the prince and sees that he's still mad at her about yesterday and doesn't even look in her direction. But even if that's not the case, today is his first battle. Ariel is a more experienced hunter and should give him advice. Ariel cheerfully tells Siegfried to come out, but he ignores her and leaves the building with Count Abisian. Siegfried is very strong, and maybe Ariel doesn't have to worry about him, but she is still interested in what happened in that novel, since she can barely remember the plot. But Siegfried is definitely the main character, and a minor event involving him happened without any incident. With the whole group on horseback, they cross a small bridge over a river. Siegfried's horse is a distinctive white colour, which makes him stand out from the rest of the group. Abisian stops and informs everyone that they have arrived at the location and will have to walk from here. He stands next to Siegfried and tells him that he has heard that under the influence of the siren's charms, he can see things, and if he is a little careless, he will be enchanted, so he asks the prince to be careful during the hunt. Siegfried asks the count not to worry about him. The group arrives at their destination. Ariel looks up and sees a large number of crows and sirens flying among the mountains and trees. The eyes of the sirens glow bright yellow light. They have long legs covered with feathers and wings instead of arms. Each siren has a different hair colour, from red shade to pink. The sirens begin to scream and sing their song to mesmerize the hunters. They cover their ears so as not to be affected by the spell. Someone speaks loudly about where they need to go to catch these creatures and points out the direction. Ariel looks up and sees one of the sirens with long red hair flying at her. The girl draws her sword from its sheath and tries to defend herself. With one swing of her sword, she slashes the siren. After finishing one, Ariel turns and sees the prince with terror in his eyes, trying to defend himself against the siren by pointing his sword, but the creature manages to wound Siegfried's arm. Ariel thinks about not having to worry about Abisian, somewhere out there, and Miliad is doing pretty well with the sirens. She comes to the conclusion that her main problem for today is not the brothers, but the prince, as he will definitely fall under the spell of the siren. The chance is not great, but still there is a possibility of bad developments. Because Ariel read the novel, she has a bad feeling. The girl looks at the prince and notices that he's not badly hurt, but she sees something strange about him. Siegfried stands motionless and unresponsive to the approaching siren, staring at one point. Ariel realizes that the prince has been bewitched and runs up to him and tries to get him to awaken from the illusion. The prince yanks her arm away from him with all his might. Ariel pitifully asks Siegfried to come to his senses. She is angry at the whole situation and concludes that simple words can't help. Ariel abruptly grabs the prince, turns him around, and apologizes in advance for what she will do. Not that she wants to, but it's the only way to free him from the stupefaction. Ariel swings her hand around and slaps him on the cheek. Siegfried regains consciousness, and holding his cheek reddened from the blow, asks Ariel what just happened, as he is in a lot of pain. Ariel tells the prince that she feels sorry for him, but that she had no other choice or he would have died. Siegfried realizes that she has once again saved him. Ariel looks at the prince, not understanding why his image is blurring strangely. She rubbed her eyes, but that did nothing to help her come to her senses. Ariel opens her eyes, wondering where the siren is going and why she sees a handsome man with a beautiful figure in front of her. She takes note of his black hair and the cute mole under his eye. Putting all the details together, Ariel comes to realize that this man looks a lot like a grown-up version of Prince Siegfried. She laughs and doesn't understand where this beautiful creature came from, and slightly begins to guess that she's just delusional. Siegfried shakes Ariel by the shoulders, trying to rouse her from the spell. She comes to her senses a little and notices the actual outline of a man shaking her by the shoulders and asking him not to punch her in the face. Ariel reflects on the fact that she herself saved Siegfried and immediately fell into the siren's net. She held the hand of the handsome boy from the illusion so tightly that she was ready to go to the end of the world with him, and then tells the prince that if he hadn't decided to shake her by the shoulders, she'd still be a prisoner of illusion, and puts her hands up in the air and says that her face comes first. Ariel has never encountered illusions while hunting before, and this time she is just a little relaxed. She doesn't understand how this could happen. From now on, she decides to be always on the lookout. Siegfried notices that she asked him to be careful, and now she herself is caught up in illusions. Ariel smilingly replies to the prince that this is also the first time for her, and thanks to him she had a great experience. Siegfried turns away embarrassed and thanks Ariel for once again saving his life, and explains that if she hadn't been there, he could have gotten into big trouble. Ariel asks not to be thanked for this, since she saw something beautiful herself. The prince asks her what she saw. Legend has it that in their illusions, the sirens show them their perfect soulmates. But in the vision, Ariel meets Siegfried. She thinks about whether or not to tell him, but if she does, how she will look him in the eye. The prince asks her again about what she saw, as he is very curious to know. Ariel, not wanting to talk about his illusion, asks Siegfried who he saw. The prince promptly replies that he saw Ariel in his illusion. She decides to take her secret to the grave and dodges the question by saying that they're in the palm of her hand right now, and nothing will happen because of one word. Ariel suggests that the prince talk about it later, hoping he will forget about it, and offers to go back to the others. The hunt continues, each trying to kill the siren with their sword. Ariel notices from afar that someone needs help and kills another siren. Ariel asks the young man she helped if he is all right. He responds by thanking her. They both walk up to the cliff to watch what is happening. Ariel notices something in the distance and wonders what is going on. Meanwhile, Prince Siegfried kills one siren after another. Behind him lies a pile of dead bodies. Ariel comes to the conclusion that maybe the prince is the one who interrupted the sirens here the most, and now no one can match him. The protagonist is on an unattainable level, but she does not understand why Siegfried behaves like a child in front of her. Seeing him in her illusion was strange for Ariel. She assumes that in the novel, Ariel loved the prince, but to her, he's just a sweet boy. She still wonders why the adult image of Siegfried appeared in her vision. Ariel continues to help the hunters this time, bandaging one of the men's wounded leg, and asks him to bear the pain a little longer. She turns around and sees Siegfried absorbed in slaying the sirens. Ariel realizes that now she no longer has to worry about his safety. Suddenly she hears screaming from somewhere, a voice that sounds quite familiar to her. Ariel peeks out from behind a rock to see who was shouting. This man turns out to be Count Ferris. He ineptly tries to protect himself from the siren's clutches by covering his face with his hands. Ariel throws her sword and pierces through the monster that wanted to kill the Count. Ferris was relieved and not noticing the bleeding wound on his shoulder, smiling, thanking Ariel for her help. The girl, unlike the Count, notices his wound and tells him that it seems deep. The Count explains to her that he was unable to react in time because of the sudden attack. Ariel jokes that it is too early to call a priest and suggests that they start treatment. She takes off some of his clothes where he was wounded and wraps a bandage around his shoulder. The Count notices that Ariel can do anything and tells her not to be modest. Ariel asks the Count not to act like that because her ideal height is still 190 centimeters. A man tells Ariel that he knows she likes the prince. The girl flatly denies this fact. The Count smiles modestly and asks Ariel not to hide it since he hasn't told anyone about it and doesn't plan to. Ariel is amused by these words and explains once again to the Count that she and the prince have nothing to do with each other and that he was only joking that day. The man, thinking it's just an excuse, assumes that he and Prince Siegfried are so close that such jokes are in order. Ariel is getting angry that the man can't change his mind. She doesn't know how much longer he's going to keep saying that. A voice came from somewhere calling Ariel to her. Count Forus assumes it is Prince Siegfried's voice. Ariel denies this and tells him that it could be a siren, as they are very good at imitating other people's voices. The Count replies to the girl in surprise that this is the first time he has heard of this fact. She does not understand how one can be so short-sighted. Ariel rises from the ground and looks up to see the prince sitting by the stone, leaning his head against it, pretending to be in great pain. The girl assumes that Siegfried is just following Count Fair's lead. The Count also notices the suffering prince and tells Ariel that his shoulder is all right and she can go. The girl watching Siegfried thinks aloud that he should call a priest. The prince replies to her that he doesn't need a priest and asks her to just hurry up. When the Count hears this, he also asks Ariel to hurry, as the prince obviously needs help. Siegfried, meanwhile, continues to cry out in pain. Ariel is angered by this situation and the prince's acting. Changing her annoyed expression to a smile, she walks over to Siegfried and asks him about where he is hurting so badly and suggests that his head may have been affected. The prince turns around and asks Ariel how she guessed that, if he didn't say he was in pain. She replies to Siegfried that she can see his cheek burning where she hit him. Now she even regrets it a little, but she can't say anything. Ariel thinks she has a pretty light hand, but she was in such a hurry to bring Siegfried to his senses that she might have miscalculated the force. She tells the prince that she is sorry for what happened. Siegfried looks up at her and tells Ariel that if she's really sorry, she should take care of him. She asks the prince why he didn't tell her earlier that he was hurt. Siegfried puts his hand to his cheek and explains to Ariel that he had no reason to talk about it since nothing had hurt until now. Ariel asks him if she should start treating him then, instead of having silly arguments with him. The prince explains that he has been in pain since she started helping the Count. Ariel comes to realize that Siegfried has only his own interests at heart. The prince tells her that while she was away, he got rid of all the sirens in the neighborhood, so he deserves a reward. Ariel smilingly asks the prince if he has ever thought about giving rather than taking. He tells her that maybe he will next time. The girl takes a seat on the ground next to the prince and opens a green bottle of healing alcohol for treating wounds and pours some onto a white handkerchief. She begins to treat Siegfried's cheek. The prince pulls the handkerchief away from him, resenting it for making him cold. Ariel notices how cute Siegfried is up close, even if he thinks only of himself. But she couldn't be mad at a man with a face like that. She asks him to bear with her because it's not that bad. A siren sneaks up behind her. Ariel tries to say that he'll get credit for his efforts, but doesn't get a chance to say anything. The prince, noticing the siren, picks Ariel up in his arms and flees holding his sword. Holding the girl by the waist, he chops the siren in half with one hand. Noticing that after defeating the monster he is still holding Ariel in his arms, he throws her off and tells her that he didn't mean it and apologizes. But she is not embarrassed by it, because she thinks that Siegfried behaved very cool, and not every day you see such things, and advises him to just stay that way. The prince gets up off the ground and heads in the other direction. Ariel thinks it's a shame he's leaving like this. I guess she won't be able to give him his reward now. Ariel shouts after him, saying that she is powerless to cure him and will have to call a priest. Since he didn't pay attention to it, Ariel reminds him that it seems the prince wanted a reward from her, and if so, let him tell her what he wants for his help on the hunt. She is ready to listen. Siegfried turns around and cheerfully asks if she's telling the truth. Ariel is a little afraid of what he might ask, and hopes it won't be anything strange. Without thinking, the prince points a finger at his cheek, hinting to Ariel that he wants her to kiss him. The girl is initially surprised by his request, but still agrees as she sees nothing strange in it. Ariel walks over to Siegfried and leans her lips lightly against his cheek where he pointed. Pulling away, she asks the prince if such a kiss would do for him as a reward. Siegfried blushes with embarrassment, and with a sweet smile replies to Ariel that it is quite enough for him. Ariel is amused by his reaction and compares him to a puppy that you want to pet. Then she comes to think it's a good idea to treat Siegfried as if he were a dog. He's a little big, but you can just think of him as a big dog who can talk. It's hard for Ariel to think of him in a different way, but if she treats him that way, her heart won't hurt, and she and Siegfried don't have much time left to be together. Back in the village, the prince is told by everyone that he is incredible, as today on the hunt he killed the most sirens and saved a lot of human lives. Someone thanks him for saving his life. If it wasn't for him, they wouldn't be here. Ariel watches from the sidelines as the hunt party praises the prince for his achievements today. She notices that Siegfried has made friends with the northern nobility faster than she thought. These people will side with Siegfried in the future and fight against Aisa together. In the meantime, they need to gather as many supporters as possible. At the end of the day, Abyssion summarizes the results and tells all the participants that the first day of the hunt went well and they managed to avoid serious injuries. In honor of this, he would like to gather everyone for a modest dinner. Soon, everyone is gathered around a set table. People are drinking beer from large wooden mugs, chatting among themselves and having fun. Sitting at the communal table, Ariel yawns from the fact that she is very tired from running around all day and swinging her sword. Ariel gets up from the table and tells everyone she's leaving the party. As suddenly the prince sitting next to her grabs her hand and asks her to stay a little longer. Hearing their dialogue, Count Forres, sitting across from the prince, asks Ariel if she is leaving alone. Then he says that Mrs. Ariel not only fought the monsters today, but was always there when someone needed first aid and worked harder than the others. The prince continues to hold Ariel's hand. The count adds to his words that the servants have already heated the water in the ladies' room, and if she is tired, she can go upstairs and rest properly, as tomorrow they will be hunting again, and therefore today it is better not to work too hard. Ariel thanks the count for his concern, calling him Ferreira, and after inferring from his distressed face, she corrects it to Ferres, and then turns to the prince and bids him farewell until tomorrow and leaves the feast. In the middle of the night, Ariel ventures out of her room into the hallway and notices the count and the prince talking to each other near the door. The prince is very unhappy about Count Ferris talking to Ariel at dinner, and they charge the count with being a little hard of hearing and not hearing what the prince said to him earlier. The count asks the prince what he means by that. Siegfried asks Ferres why he is always hanging around the countess. Ariel is watching them, wondering what the prince is doing near the count's room and what they are talking about. After a little thought, she realizes. The count crosses his arms on his chest and asks the prince if he's referring to his actions today. But isn't that what true friends do? Take care of each other? He explains that he was just being courteous, nothing more. Siegfried confirms his speculation, and yet advises him to stop acting like this, because Ariel has him for such courtesies, and the count is only burdening her. The count asks Siegfried if he himself has not taken advantage of the lady's position today for his own benefit, and she was uncomfortable with it. He points out that Siegfried is only the second crown prince and will always be threatened. Because of this, he doesn't understand why Mrs. Ariel wants to be with the prince all the time. Siegfried reproaches the count for having said too many words. Siegfried replies that he thinks he can forgive him this time, and that he thinks it is a sign of his good-naturedness. The prince is angered by this answer. He angrily asks the count to listen to him again, and this time more carefully about how he shouldn't even think about Ariel. He wants to add something to his speech, but Ariel sneaks up and covers his mouth with 2 hands before he can say anything else to the count. To dispel the negative atmosphere, Ariel, laughing and not removing her hand from Siegfried's mouth, tries to tell the count that the prince is making it all up. But Forres does not let her finish. He starts making excuses for being too rude, as he should have left and given her and the prince a chance to be alone. Ariel tries to stop the count to explain the situation, but he leaves and apologizes for everything. She becomes even more angry that for the second time, it is the prince's fault that she is not understood and does not want to listen because she believes him. Ariel removes her hands from Siegfried's face and is about to leave for her room, but Siegfried manages to ask her if she really disgusts him that much. She confirms and rhetorically asks how it could be otherwise. The prince didn't like that answer, and he looked down at the floor in resentment. Ariel, noticing the sad expression on his face, concludes that she should have said it more softly. Siegfried does not raise his eyes to Ariel and tells her that Count Ferres is keeping an eye on her, and that when she appears, he turns his gaze to her. Ariel asks him how he knows this. Siegfried explains that he only has eyes for her. She wasn't exactly happy to hear that from a 15-year-old, because if she'd heard it from a 20-year-old, she would have been over the moon. But so far the prince had only made her suffer with such phrases. The prince asks Ariel what she is doing in the hallway at this late hour. She tells him that she woke up and decided to just take a walk. Siegfried asks her if by any chance she is on her way to the kitchen. The girl confirms this and suggests that the prince come with her. She was actually hoping that he would decline the offer, since she asked him about it out of politeness, but the prince still agrees to go there with her. They come into the kitchen, lit by the bright light of lamps, with a pile of books, collector's plates and paintings, under one of which is a fireplace. They sit down opposite each other at a long table with a candlestick in the middle and eat in complete silence. Ariel thinks about when she and the prince are sitting like this. She doesn't even know what to say. She dares to speak and reminds the prince of their first meeting. The prince tells her that that day he was troubled because he had to hide in a chase organized by his older brother Aisa. Ariel remembers Siegfried saying that when he saw her for the first time, he felt as if everything had turned upside down and nauseous, and asks him if he felt the same way after that day. He explains to her that it wasn't because he was uncomfortable, and he had never said anything like that. When he saw her, it was as if everything inside him had turned upside down, and he was confused. His heart was racing in his chest. He couldn't take his eyes off Ariel. Siegfried also kept wondering if they had ever met before. Ariel laughingly tells the prince that all his phrases are too trite, and asks Siegfried if he has fallen in love with her at first sight, and hopes that that's not what he's trying to tell her, because it seems boring to her. The prince asks Ariel in a serious tone about why she thinks it's boring, why she just dismisses his feelings, and asks her to repeat it again, if his words are really boring to her. Ariel looks away and denies it and wants to say something else, but the prince doesn't want to listen to her further and wishes her good night. Then he gets up from the table and heads for the exit. Ariel realizes from his reaction that she said the wrong thing. The monster hunt lasted for 3 more days. From that night on, Siegfried never came close to Ariel. But that didn't mean she didn't feel the prince's presence. Siegfried was always watching her from somewhere. But when their gazes met, the prince proudly raised his head and turned away, showing Ariel his displeasure. After a while, the anger faded and Siegfried was back to his old self. It was clear that his resentment would not last long. On the last day of the hunt, the people celebrate the victory over the sirens. Everyone dances, eats, and has fun. The red-haired man has a drink with Siegfried and tells everyone that thanks to the prince's efforts, they were able to end the monster hunt quickly. The prince modestly accepts the thanks and notes that the others have also worked hard, and it is not only his merit. Ariel sits alone on a bench in her long blue dress and reflects on the fact that the hunt has only lasted 4 days, and last month it lasted 2 weeks. She had even joked that Siegfried could kill 100 sirens in a day, but now it seems that is indeed possible. Killian notices the girl from afar and comes up to her to say hello, saying that it seems the prince is busy since he doesn't spend time with her. Ariel is even pleased to see Killian with a smile and greets him back, indicating that it's been a while since they've seen each other. Killian agrees with her, as it has been 4 days since they last saw each other. Ariel asks the man if he has worked hard for Prince Siegfried since they have not seen each other. He notes that Ariel seems very interested in his highness. The girl denies the assumption. Killian remembers that sometimes they say the stronger the denial, the closer the truth. Ariel indignantly asks him who says that. Killian notices that Ariel doesn't really want to talk about the prince, and instead of talking about him, he offers her a dance, but she refuses. The man realizes that there is no point in persuasion, and turns around saying that there is nothing to be done in this case. He will have to sit alone in the corner. Ariel guessed that Killian was being manipulative and still stops him and asks why he makes others feel guilty. Ariel thinks that his proposal is not such a bad idea, but agrees to only 1 dance. This situation reminded Killian of their first meeting in a bar. Then he was also standing behind the girl. Ariel smilingly replies that she is still grateful for the drink, and if he hadn't tried to kill the prince afterwards, they would have only fond memories of that evening. Killian reminds Ariel that she was the one who warned the prince that he was almost killed, and jokes that the sword wound will heal in time, but the scar on his soul will remain. Ariel rebukes Killian for talking too much, and it's all long over. He asks Ariel if it bothers her, and without waiting for an answer, he holds out his hand for her to give him 1 dance. Suddenly a sharp dagger flies by Killian's head and gets stuck in the wall next to his head. That's something no one expected. The dagger is thrown by the enraged prince because he sees Ariel and Killian holding hands. Siegfried gritted his teeth and mocked Killian's offer to dance with Ariel. The man puts his hand behind his head and tells the prince that he didn't know he could cause him such anxiety with his actions. Siegfried rudely asks Kilian why he doesn't just disappear if he's figured it out. The man bows to the prince with his hand on his chest and tells the prince that he can assume he was never here, and leaves. After they are alone, Ariel tells the prince that he didn't have to act like that. Siegfried clarifies what she means by this, reminding Ariel that Kilian tried to kill them and now pretends to obey him. But since Kilian served Isa, it is hard to predict when he will show his true colors, so he thinks Ariel is being too careless. In response to his claims, she reminds the prince that it has only been 3 days since the hunt began and asks him if he is too bloodthirsty. Without waiting for an answer, Ariel notes that if she hadn't spoken to the prince first, he would have sulked at her until he left the village. It had happened to Siegfried before. Whenever they had a little argument, he would immediately start ignoring Ariel. The prince asks the girl if she means that they won't see each other again. Perhaps after the hunt is over, there will be no reason for them to see each other again. Siegfried assumes that in time, Ariel will forget him completely and continue to live a quiet life as if nothing had happened. Assuming what the outcome of events will be, the prince asks Ariel again if it will be easier for her. Ariel at this time imagines a normal life without Siegfried. It will be the same as always, the same old days. To banish the boredom, the maids will tell her different rumors. Miliad will be sneaking bets and Abyssian will reprimand him for it. Occasionally she will receive marriage proposals. And it's possible that their companionship is for nothing. But even if they break up soon, Ariel can't forget Siegfried and tells him so directly. But she doesn't deny that they might meet someday, and that Siegfried might write her letters, and advises him not to be so categorical. Sometimes they will still think of each other and do the best for each other. The prince answered nothing to this, being offended by the girl, turned around and left. Ariel followed Siegfried blindly, but she couldn't find him. She has no idea where he's gone. At this time, the prince is walking alone in the village. Suddenly someone recognizes him in the crowd and asks if he is the prince. Siegfried approaches a man who recognizes him. He is Baron Herbert from the province to which the village of Korta belongs. Ariel finds the prince and notices that he is talking to a man with a thick build. Ariel doesn't know the man, but she also suspects that Siegfried hasn't been acquainted with him until now either. Baron Herbert tells the prince that he would like him to stay at his manor, rather than in this dilapidated place where they now all the band members live. Siegfried replies to him that he cannot leave his men there and live alone on the estate. The Baron is not offended by the prince's refusal, and notes that the prince tries to remain loyal to his subjects, and considers this behaviour a sign of a true ruler, and reports to Siegfried that most believe in him, and that he will take the throne. Ariel overhears their dialogue from afar. She wonders what the man is trying to say. The Baron adds to his words that he considers Crown Prince Siegfried the only true heir. The Empress died, and the forces behind Isa gained control of Siegfried's family. A bunch of people from his brother's clan manipulated the political world, which led to discord, and now the country is in chaos. But soon many will witness Prince Siegfried, the true heir, overthrow Isa. It is said that everything will change when he lays claim to the throne. Such are the hopes Baron Herjert and many other nobles have for the prince. Ariel doesn't like Siegfried being harassed with this speech about his succession to the throne. She knows that many people think of him like the Baron, so the prince doesn't want to discuss the subject and talk about it so openly. Wishing to sincerely support the prince, Baron Herjert has prepared a small gift and asks Siegfried to follow him. The prince replies to the man that it is not necessary to give him anything and leaves, as he seems to have seen everything he wants. The Baron asks Siegfried not to leave, but he does not listen to him. He walks past Ariel without paying any attention to her and defiantly grazes her shoulder. The next morning, Ariel comes down the stairs wearing a dress with a green skirt, a corset, and a long-sleeved white top. Abyssian notices that her sister is already awake. He tells Ariel that grapes have been delivered from the farm, and she can go and eat them. Ariel is happy about this news, as she has been waiting for this day for a long time. Abyssian gives his sister a plate of grapes, saying that there are not many grapes here, so she can ask for more if she needs them. Ariel takes the grapes from her brother's hands, saying that she wants to eat as many grapes as possible. She considers it her reward for her hard work while hunting sirens. On the way out of the kitchen, Ariel remembers the prince who left yesterday without saying a word, and after talking to the aristocrat, Siegfried looked very unhappy. With a plate of grapes, she goes to the prince's room and waits for him at the door. After a while, he comes out of his chambers. Ariel approaches Siegfried and, showing him a plate of grapes, tells him that they were brought today from the village of Quarter and offers to taste them together. The prince walks defiantly past Ariel and rudely replies that he's fine as he is, so let her eat her grapes herself. The prince then makes his way down the stairs and heads for the exit of the building. Siegfried sits on the lawn under a tree and ponders something of his own all alone. A little later, Ariel finds him, and tucking her long hair behind her ear leans over and asks the prince what he's doing here alone. She sits down next to Siegfried and tells the prince that this place is so beautiful, the sun is shining and there is a light breeze so peaceful that you want to lie down and take a nap. The prince replies to Ariel saying that perhaps this is the peace of mind he will not be getting anytime soon. Ariel remembers that after the monster hunt, Siegfried will go straight to the Eastern Front to resolve the conflict. His life will be in danger, and his rest will be forgotten. Ariel assures the prince that he will do well, and if he goes to the Eastern Front, let him be as active as he is now. The prince asks Ariel why she mentioned the Eastern Front. The girl realizes that she said too much, because in the book there is a mention that he will go to the Eastern Front, but it hasn't happened in the present yet. Siegfried tells her that he has not yet decided where he will go next, and again asks Ariel how she knew he was going to the Eastern Front. Ariel explains to him that she knows he needs to expand his influence over the entire empire, and thought he could go where the people are suffering from the conqueror. After listening to her, the prince replies that it is possible. Ariel is relieved that she got out of it. She reassures Siegfried that if he goes to war, he will definitely come back alive. She is sure of it. The prince notices how easily Ariel talks about it, since it's a battlefield, and there's no guarantee he'll come back from it alive. In any case, he will go to fight even if not on the Eastern Front, because Aisa has asked the emperor to increase the supervision of him. The timing is perfect. His brother thinks it's a good opportunity to get rid of him without getting his hands dirty in blood. But the nobles are pushing for Siegfried to join the power struggle. The prince thinks Ariel is talking about the war so easily because she has nothing to do with him. After briefly sitting in silence, Ariel turns to the prince, offering him some distraction from his bad thoughts. She advises the prince not to think about what hasn't happened yet, and not to worry his soul unnecessarily, as nothing is certain yet. Ariel asks him to think about what today brings them, and nothing else. She remembers to know and gets so angry that her face turns red at the thought of them dumping all the responsibility on a prince who is still 15 years old. Ariel is sure that they are only talking, but they do not really support Prince Siegfried's side, since none of the nobles have openly stated their position. She considers them all cowards who are only looking for gain, and advises the prince to ignore their every word in his direction. Siegfried, angry at the situation, tells Ariel that she can say that, but it does not change the fact that he is very afraid to go to war. He reminds the girl that she does not know why he has to endure all these threats and difficulties. His mother is dead, and there is no more room for the prince in the emperor's palace. He has nothing left, so why fight for what? Ariel suggests that he just think about the future. She wants to say something else, but realizes that if she says it, there is no turning back. Ariel decides to do it and says that in the future he could be her husband. Siegfried didn't expect to hear Ariel say that. He jumps up from the ground and asks her why she decided to do that. The girl reiterates that the reason the prince should fight is so they can be together. The prince asks why she changed her mind. Ariel explains to him that she would like to see him grow up and how handsome he could be in the future. It would be easier for her to wait 5 years and then see what the emperor does. Siegfried checks with Ariel to see if she's implying that he's not developed enough for her right now. Ariel comes up to him and, rubbing his dark hair, explains that it is very hard for her to see a little boy as a grown man. Siegfried, embarrassed, asks not to be teased. The girl strokes the prince's head, saying that she is sorry she took his feelings so lightly, but that doesn't mean he should accept them right away. Instead, Ariel is going to protect the prince and his feelings for her until his highness grows to the age she needs, and when that time comes, she will be sure of her feelings. Siegfried asks to wait for him and promises that when he grows up, he will surely return to Ariel to ask for her hand in marriage. The girl starts laughing at the fact that now everything will be fine between them without any misunderstandings. Ariel suggests that the prince go into the house and taste the grapes from the court tree, as she has never eaten one today. Siegfried agrees to this. As they head for the house, Ariel reflects on how strange it is that when she heard Siegfried confess his love for her, she thought only of how to help him, feeling as if some unknown force might intervene. But in any case, She can no longer say that she and Siegfried have nothing to do with each other, because that's not quite true. Admiring his looks, Ariel is trying to figure out what she should do in this case, as she likes him too much and wants to give him a chance to prove himself. She was not going to break off her relationship with Siegfried, and it would be nice to wait for him to come back from the war as a beautiful man. Siegfried and Ariel are sitting at a bar stool by the fireplace, a plate with a bunch of blue berries on the table. A girl eats grapes with pleasure. Tasting these berries, she has a feeling that she is sitting in a vineyard, and it tastes like it allows her to forget her painful past. Turning back to the prince, Ariel asks him about why he doesn't eat the berries. Siegfried replies to her that he is fine as he is, and just seeing her eat is enough. The girl tells him not to be sorry when the berries run out. The prince finishes his drink and looks at Ariel in silence. Siegfried decides to ask the girl a question. She asks which question he is referring to. The prince asks Ariel about the illusion she saw. Taking both bunches of grapes in her hands and spitting out what she had eaten on her plate, she asked him if it was about the illusion when she fell under the siren's spell. The prince confirms this and adds that last time he left the question unanswered. Covering her mouth with her hand, Ariel answers him that she doesn't know that since she doesn't remember it well. The prince, angry with the girl, reproaches her for lying, and she should remember it very well, as nobles often tell about it. If you see it once, you can never forget it. He asks Ariel again if she will tell him about it, but the girl clenches her hand into a fist and laughs and asks why she should tell him, because she has just seen her ideal. The prince aggressively asks her about who she saw there. Ariel doesn't understand what she means by who, as it could have been a fictitious person. Siegfried replies that he has seen her being the wife of a nobleman, and all these visions are connected to real people. He asks again about who she saw in her illusion, since by refusing to talk she is arousing suspicion. Ariel turns to the prince and smilingly replies that she saw a handsome man, her ideal which he already knows well. With a serious expression on his face, Siegfried asks Ariel about whether the man in the illusion was more beautiful than him. She grinningly confirms that this man in her illusion was several times more handsome than the prince. Siegfried does not turn to Ariel and assures her that she has never met a better man than him. Ariel indignantly tells him that there must be some, since the one she saw was very handsome and mature. She turns away from him, realizing she almost said something. The prince asks her what she means by adult, and Ariel corrects him, explaining that she meant to say that she is not an adult, but an older man. The prince starts to guess and asks her if she's doing the adult version of him. Ariel turns to Siegfried and asks him about how he realized that it was the adult version of him. The prince smiles and rests his chin on his hand, telling her that it just rolled off his tongue, and asking her if she really saw the adult version of him in the illusion. Siegfried is embarrassed to learn that Ariel's ideal type of man is the adult version of him, and tells her that he hopes to grow up quickly, and asks her if she wants to say that now that she knows what he will be like in the future, she is willing to wait for him. Ariel denies this and tells the prince that she is not interested at all. The next morning, Ariel proceeds to pack her things to send home, and puts her things in a small maroon suitcase sitting on the floor. Suddenly someone starts knocking on her door and asking if Mrs. Elleritz is here. Ariel opens the door, and seeing a man in front of her, asks him what happened and why he came here. A man in a brown cap, gloves and a beard on his face bows to Ariel and says it is a pleasure to meet her. He introduces himself as Cavil and tells her that he is the owner of the vineyards in the village of Court. After listening to the man, Ariel compliments his grapes, saying they are delicious. Cavil clarifies that he didn't quite mean it that way, and specifies that he is the former owner of those vineyards. Ariel asks him why he came to her then. The man informs the Countess that she is now the owner of the vineyards, and he has come to welcome the new mistress. Ariel is surprised by this unexpected news. Mr. Cavil tells the girl that he would like to stay here and continue working if Mrs. Ariel will allow it. Clenching her hands into fists, Ariel asks him what is going on since she has never bought a vineyard. She asks Cavil if he has the certificate. The man confirms that he does and pulls it out of his black vest, saying that he is here to give it to her. And he unfolds the paper and asks Ariel to sign it in the space provided. Ariel comes to believe that no one she knows could have spent such a large sum to buy back the vineyards except one man, Prince Siegfried. The girl, smiling politely, asks Cavil to wait for a while as she needs to clarify something before signing her name. Ariel goes down to the kitchen, where the prince and the rest of the nobility are sitting at a table with papers scattered about, and angrily asks His Highness what he has done. Siegfried, with a slight smile, asks Ariel if she likes the court vineyards he gave her. Ariel tries to tell him something, but the prince misunderstands her and asks if the gift is too small. If she wants, he can buy the whole village. The girl explains to the prince that she didn't mean it at all, and asks him how he could buy something meaningful and not even say anything to her. It's too onerous a gift. As she continues her speech, she adds that it's not just some basket of grapes, but an entire farm. The prince lowers his gaze and asks her if she liked it, or if he should have done things very differently. Ariel replies to the prince saying that this will not do, and asks him why he is doing this to her. Shouldn't he have thought of something better than vineyards? She realizes that if it turns out that the prince gave her the vineyards, it will shake up the whole capital. The girl refuses to accept such a large and burdensome gift. She has no reason to. Putting his hands on the table, Siegfried clarifies the reason for the refusal, as he has been up all night thinking about what to give her. He feels as if he can't give her what she needs. Siegfried thought about what gift Ariel would like, and remembered about the vineyards. Thanks to her own farm, she could eat grapes all year round, instead of enjoying them once a season. The prince asks her if he has overdone it, as he is giving something for the first time, and does not know how to behave in such cases. Ariel notices this awkward expression of His Highness. He really thought that she would like it. She doesn't understand what to do in such a case, and how she can refuse the prince. One of the elderly aristocrats forgives Ariel not to overdo it, as he realized that His Highness bought her these vineyards, and asks the girl how she will look in the eyes of people if she refuses the prince. Another long-haired man confirms this, and says that if he were in her place, he would drown His Highness in tears of gratitude. Gabriel approaches Ariel with the contract and again asks her to sign it to transfer the property. After thinking, Ariel decides to accept such an expensive gift and signs the document. The former owner of the vineyards officially announces to the Lord Ariel as the new owner of the Quarter Farm. The girl turns her back on everyone and rejoices that she was able to accept the gift. At this time, Count Abyssian enters the kitchen and tells everyone that it's time to leave the village, and if they don't want to be homeless, they'd better hurry up and pack. Ariel bows to the villagers before going on her good journey and makes everyone stay happily ever after. Before she does, she notices that the nobles are whispering about something. Ariel gets the feeling that their attitude towards her has changed a lot, or so it seems to her. The elderly earl tells someone that he hopes that Mistress Ariel will also have a good time with His Highness. Ariel turns to him and asks him about what he just said. The Count asks Ariel not to hide her relationship with Prince Siegfried, as everyone here knows how much they have become friends during the hunt, and this cannot be untrue, as she has saved the prince twice. The man reminds her that many have tried to win her favour, but even he couldn't afford to buy an entire farm. If such a gift is appropriate, it is clearly of great importance to His Highness Ariel. The girl turns back, and seeing how I'm talking about something else, comes to the idea that something is obviously wrong here. Soon the whole group changed into hiking clothes and set off through the forest. Ariel rides her horse closer to Siegfried and notices how well His Majesty looks today. The prince replies to Ariel that he doesn't doubt it since he thinks he never looks bad. Abyssian turns to the others and says that if they want to make it to their lodging, they need to get out of the forest before dark. Ariel feels an ominous feeling, but she's been down this road before. It's just a little darker than last time. Prince notices something too and asks if there are any problems on the road. Suddenly, arrows from the bushes start flying in all directions, some of which are clearly aimed at Siegfried. When they see the assassin, everyone starts to defend themselves, some jumping off their horses. Ariel thinks she has to protect His Highness first. At this time, the prince's horse gets frightened by the arrows and noise and tries to throw the prince off the saddle. Siegfried tries to stop it. Ariel notices an archer in black who launched an arrow at one of the aristocrats. Ariel aims at him and it hits him right in the heart, piercing through his body. Noticing that there are several of them here, she comes to the realization that this isn't just going to end and needs to find a safe place. In the distance, she spots another archer in a tree who aims his arrow at the prince. Ariel realizes that from this distance it could be dangerous and instant death would ensue. The archer fires an arrow. It is about to pierce Siegfried at full speed through and through as he doesn't notice it. The prince, sensing danger, turns around and sees Ariel grab the flying arrow with her hand, right by Siegfried's body. The prince notices that the white glove on the girl's hand is cut and covered with blood. He asks Ariel if she is all right. Suddenly, his horse starts kicking again. The prince tries with all his might to stay on the saddle and calm the furious horse. Unable to stop her, he runs away with her deep into the forest. Ariel notices this but can do nothing. At this time, Abyssian stops one enemy and demands that he stand still and not move. Then he turns to his sister and gives her orders to ride after the prince, while they can deal with his enemies here without her. Ariel, having heard the orders, sets out to find the missing Prince Siegfried deep in the forest. Abyssian, meanwhile, sits the dead archer against a tree and removes his black mask, revealing only his eyes. The distinguishing feature of this spy was that there was a long scar near his lip, and his hair was a dark grey colour. Count Abyssian calls Kilian to him, mentioning that he served Crown Prince Aisa before meeting Siegfried. The Count asks him if he knows the man who shot the prince. Kilian puts his hand to his chin and tells Abyssian that the archer's face looks familiar to him, but he doesn't know his name, though he has often met him in the palace. It becomes clear to the Count that Prince Aisa is behind this attack, and the archer was definitely aiming at His Majesty Prince Siegfried. Meanwhile, Ariel continues her search for the prince, riding through the forest on horseback and asking if His Majesty is here. She is sure that the prince must be here somewhere. Siegfried suddenly comes out of the bushes and tells Ariel that he is here and there is no need to look for him anymore. Ariel is frightened by this unexpected appearance and asks the prince what he forgot in the bushes. Ariel tells the prince that she was very frightened and asks him where his horse is. The prince, shaking off leaves and soil, replies that it was running away and he had to jump off it so it wouldn't throw him off, and then it ran off somewhere else. The girl asks the prince if he is hurt or not. Siegfried replies that he is all right, but that he is only embarrassed because his horse has gone wild, and at this moment he is trying to remove the last leaf from his back. The prince explains to Ariel that he is used to such threats in the palace, and that he has often been subjected to them. Afterwards, he asks the girl if she is the one who has suffered the most in this fight. As she caught the arrow on the fly, the prince has never met a man who can do that. Ariel starts laughing at that question. With a smile on her face, she explains that because of the emergency situation, she was prepared for such a thing, and she just had a reflex. At this point, Ariel is thinking that she is actually a little shaken after this situation, and it seems like she knew exactly where and when the arrow would fly. Prince Siegfried approaches Ariel and asks her to show him the hand with which she grabbed the arrow, but the girl replies that there is nothing wrong with it. Siegfried examines her palm and asks Ariel if there is any healing ointment left. She tells the prince that some ointment is still in stock. Distracted by her wounded arm, Ariel looks up and notices her brother Count Abyssian's troop. Ariel, turning her brother's attention, yells to him about being with the prince next to him in the bushes. Abiscione turns around at the sounds, and noticing his sister and Prince Siegfried, gets off his horse and asks them if they are all right, and if they have met any other assassins. Ariel tells his brother that they are fine and uninjured, and asks him how he is feeling. Standing with his back to the others, the Count says he's fine, but Miliad has been shot in the arm, and 5 other knights were seriously injured in the battle. Abyssian approaches Prince Siegfried, and bowing to him reports to him that the assassins were a message from his older brother Aisa. The prince responds to the Count saying that he knows about his brother's persecution, and he didn't have to talk about it. Abyssian informs the party that it is getting dark, and therefore he sees no point in trying to get out of the forest before nightfall. The Count suggests to stay in the forest, and at the first rays of the sun to go to the nearest village, but now it is necessary to help the wounded. Prince Siegfried approaches the Count and apologizes for disrupting plans and hurting people because of him. He offers to compensate for all the damage and to go to town to find the best healer. Meanwhile, the squad had already settled the camp, set up large white tents in white and blue colours. Ariel gets up after lying on the mattress for a while because she can't sleep, as she hasn't slept in tents for a long time and is used to it. She decides to get out for some fresh air by pushing back the tent partition. Walking outside, Ariel sees the prince sitting on a stump by the fire all alone, gazing into the flames. She wonders why Siegfried is sitting outside alone. Just looking at him makes Ariel's heart clench. She decides to approach the prince and ask him what he is doing alone on the street at this late hour. Siegfried tells Ariel that he just couldn't sleep, so he sits here. Then the prince asks the girl the same question. She tells him that he can't sleep either. Ariel decides to ask the prince if he is all right, as he seems sad. Siegfried asks the girl what she means by asking him such a question. Ariel explains that she thought His Majesty was suffering alone. The prince replies that she has misunderstood and assures her that he is perfectly fine. Ariel doesn't really believe his words, as everything seems to be quite different, and again asks the prince if he is sure that everything is all right with him, and if he is not deceiving her. Siegfried asks Ariel if he has really suffered so often. The girl smilingly confirms this, but she likes it when Siegfried behaves in an age-appropriate way, and asks him to do so more often. The prince responds to Ariel by saying that if he does this more often, everyone will have reason to laugh at him. Ariel clarifies that she said these words sincerely, and not out of a desire to make fun of him. Siegfried thinks aloud that perhaps Aisa will not rest even if he returns to the palace. He will still try to kill him by any means, and the people around him will be in danger, so he cannot react so emotionally to everything every time. And thinks that he is still lucky, as no one was seriously injured in yesterday's fight, and they should focus on strengthening the forces that can give a good fight to his older brother. After listening to the prince, Ariel tries to hug the prince and marvels loudly that Prince Siegfried is practically a grown man for thinking like that. The prince dodges Ariel and asks her to stop treating him like a child. Ariel is glad he says that, because she was starting to worry about it. She reminds the prince that it is time for him to go to bed, as to become her ideal you need to be at least 190 centimeters, and wishes him good night, saying that he will see you tomorrow morning. Arriving in the morning at the nearest village, they finally found a place to sleep after the long journey, and the wounded were able to receive medical attention. It was planned that the squad would stop in this village for 24 hours and then continue on their way home. But because some of the group needed medical treatment, they decided to stay longer. The prince crosses his arms on his chest and says that he has already rented rooms for a few days, and asks Ariel what to do now, to which she replies that he needs to think about it. Siegfried asks Ariel if she knew that there are many sights to see here, that you can also walk to the sea, and that there are puppet shows in the evenings. Ariel listens to the prince with interest as she learns more and more about the village where they are staying. When she hears from him about the puppet theatre, she remarks that she knew the prince had enjoyed the performance at the last festival. Siegfried replies that unfortunately he had not been able to watch it all the way through then. Ariel asks the prince why this happened. Not wanting to talk in detail, he replies that there were many reasons. And hiding his embarrassment, he turns his back to Ariel and suggests that she take a walk to the sea first. Siegfried and Ariel come to the beach, while the prince walks calmly holding his shoes in his hands. Ariel runs along the sand, holding a long gold-coloured skirt, and notices how clear and beautiful the water is. Ariel's gaze falls on the sand, and she notices a seashell that has washed ashore. She reaches out to pick it up from the sand. Siegfried asks Ariel with a serious expression what she is holding in her hands and assumes it is some kind of trash. The girl smilingly tells the prince that it is not trash, but a seashell. The prince looks off into the distance with his hands in his pockets and asks Ariel how much the beach cost. She is outraged by such a question from the prince, considering that last time he bought the vineyards. Ariel asks the prince why he suddenly brings it up. Siegfried replies that he noticed how much she liked it here, and it made him think. Ariel explains to him that the sea cannot belong to anyone. It cannot be bought or sold. She decides to ask him that if he could buy the village, he would give it to her as a gift. Siegfried replies that he can buy her a village, but Ariel refuses as she thinks his heart is enough for her. The prince tells her that the heart cannot be seen and he must give her something tangible. Ariel explains to Siegfried that there is no need to buy a whole village. She knows that he is rich, and that is already wonderful. The prince replies that he doesn't want to be just fine, he needs to be sure. But of what? He is never allowed to say. Ariel interrupts his speech, reminding the prince that the puppet show has already begun. She pushes him at his back and tells him to hurry up, as she wonders what's going to happen there, and they need to get good seats. Sometime later, they do arrive at the puppet show, and they silently watch what is happening on the stage, standing in the crowd of spectators. Suddenly, Ariel sees the prince going somewhere. Ariel asks His Highness where he is going. Siegfried tells her that he has some business to attend to. Ariel asks him indignantly and sadly what business he might have here. The prince tells Ariel without explaining anything that he will be back soon, and mentally answers the girl's question that he will have things to do if he looks for them properly. Ariel gives Siegfried a suspicious look. He never told her where he had gone or why. Ariel begins to think that the prince is hiding something from her, because when the show is over, Prince Siegfried has not returned to the show. Ariel loudly calls the prince a liar, because he said he wanted the show, and then disappeared. She tries to comfort herself with the thought that Siegfried could have just gone to the bathroom and gotten lost, because he's never been to this village. But there's no denying the possibility that Aisa sent someone to kill the prince again. Ariel decides to wait a little longer for his return. Finally, she hears the prince's voice calling her by name. She turns sharply around to face him and asks him about where he's been all this time. The prince repeats that he had business to attend to and asks Ariel to go somewhere with him for a few minutes. Ariel asks him why she suddenly has to go out with him, why he told her he wanted to see a show and didn't even come back until it was over, and asks him again about where he's been all this time. Siegfried gently takes Ariel's hand and tells her that he has something to show her and starts to lead her somewhere. They come to the square and sit on the ledge of an oblong fountain. Ariel, tired of waiting, asks him what he wanted to show her. The prince places a small red box with gilded patterns in front of her. Ariel opens it and sees in it a gorgeous, expensive necklace with 5 gemstones in a red-pink hue. At a loss for words from the beauty of this gift, she stammeringly asks the prince what this jewellery is and specifies whether it is the reason for his absence from the puppet show. Siegfried explains his gift, remembering Ariel's words that the sea cannot belong to anyone, so he wanted to give something tangible. Because of his feelings, the prince bought a lot of things, but she said that his gifts are burdensome. So to prove his feelings, Siegfried thought it would be better to choose carefully. The prince looks at Ariel and asks with a smile if she would accept such a gift. Ariel examines a necklace with rubies to match her eye colour and concludes that Siegfried was clearly thinking of her when he chose it. Before, he would have bought up all the jewellery, but such a gift would really be burdensome for her, so he chose the most appropriate piece of jewellery out of all of them. It means a lot. The prince really wants her to accept him so badly. I think she's beginning to understand him now. Soon Siegfried would be off to war and would not return until a couple years later. Ariel has already thought about it and decided to hold back her feelings, but when the prince behaves this way, she finds it hard to resist. Closing the box, Ariel thanks Siegfried for such a gift and promises to keep it for a long time to come. Back at the lodge, they discuss the puppet show. Ariel notices that the prince didn't get to see the show through to the end this time. He explains that he didn't think he would. Ariel suggests that they watch it together next time. Siegfried agrees. A man runs up to them at full speed and tells them about the trouble that happened recently. Mrs. Ariel's vineyard suddenly caught fire. All the farmers and their families died at the scene of the disaster. 4 days later, they took the wounded soldiers and returned to Eliprit's manor. After the fire, the atmosphere in the house was depressing. Obviously not an accident, but a warning to the Eliprit's family. Ariel and the prince are sitting on the bed. She is sure that the fire is Aisa's doing, but it is not clear why he did it. Siegfried clenches his hands into fists in anger and says that his brother doesn't need a reason. He probably heard rumours that he bought the farm. Ariel still doesn't understand it, as the vineyards were betrayed to her and they no longer belong to the prince from that moment on. The prince explains that it only made matters worse. He wanted to intimidate more than just him. Aisa tried to send a message to the Eliprit's family in such a horrible way. Ariel concludes that this is a warning for supporting Prince Siegfried. A servant enters the room. Ariel tells him that she would like to have a funeral and asks him if the bodies have been delivered or not. A young man tells Ariel that unfortunately the fire has destroyed almost everything. The villagers want to have a quiet send-off without anyone seeing them. Ariel embraces Siegfried and asks him not to blame himself for the deaths of these people, as it is the result of Aisa's tyranny, which does not spare even ordinary people. The prince replies that he knows this, but still it's his fault. Even his brother couldn't expect things to go this far. For the prince, it's terrible. Getting out of bed, Siegfried continues to talk about how things have turned out this way, and he can only hope for luck, but he will still protect the lives of those who are still alive. Siegfried informs the servant that Aisa can get to the inhabitants of the manor and orders him to strengthen the guard of the house and to be always on the lookout. As Ariel listens to Siegfried cope with the situation, she thinks that he is the true heir to the emperor and admires the fact that even in such a situation, the prince does not allow himself to be knocked out and continues to act. Siegfried seems calmer now, which is a good thing, because the difficulties have only just begun and he needs to learn to be less susceptible. Ariel and Siegfried are sitting on a red couch in her brother Count Abyssian's study. He informs them that an imperial decree has recently raised the fee for their estate, and the decree said that other noble families would be subject to the same. But there was only one reason why the Eleprits were first on that list for price increases. Ariel is angry with the Emperor. She guesses that he and Isa want to put pressure on her family for supporting Prince Siegfried. She doesn't understand why they don't just declare that they have no connection to the Crown Prince. Count Abyssian tells His Highness that he cannot add anything else in such a difficult situation for everyone. He explains that their family has always been neutral in politics. Ariel jumps up from the couch and fearfully asks his brother what he means by that. Abyssian tells his sister that he knows His Highness has feelings for her, but now anything that will connect the prince to them will only complicate the already complicated situation, and adds that these complications will increase not only for the Eleritz family, but also for the Crown Prince. Siegfried realizes that he is being informed and tells the Count that he is leaving and going to the Eastern Front. Ariel assumes that the prince wants to build up his power. He will go out into the battlefield and become several times stronger to protect those close to him. He will fight not only for them, but also for Ariel, as he has made a promise that he will return from the war and offer his hand and heart. The prince decides to write to His Majesty now. Then he will definitely give him permission to do so, considering that he didn't care about him at all when he was still in the palace. Ariel looks at the prince with the pitying look. Siegfried asks not to look at him like that. The fact that he is going to war has long been a matter of course. Ariel reflects on the fact that even though he was destined to go to the Eastern Front, she still has hope that the prince is not doing this just because of her. She sincerely wishes him to return from the front a stronger man. That's how it was decided that Siegfried would go to the front. The moment of saying goodbye to him is really close. At night in the corridor, Ariel notices her brother Miliad. She is angry at him for gambling at such a difficult time for the family, and asks him what time it is. The brother is frightened by the sudden appearance of his sister behind his back. Miliad replies to Ariel that it's 1:30 in the morning. His sister rudely clarifies that that's not what she asked him. He is holding a small red box. Ariel asks his brother why Abyssian hasn't cut his pocket money yet. Miliad replies that he has, but that sometimes his older brother has been kind to him. Ariel notices the box in her brother's hands and asks what it is. Miliad shows his sister the box and explains that he took it from a man who came to them from the south. Ariel asks why he took it unless he had money, but even if it is expensive, it is not allowed to take other people's things. Ariel asks what's inside that box. Miliad tells her that he was just given it and doesn't know what's inside it. She hits her brother on the head for taking the thing without knowing what's inside it. Her brother explains that the man who gave him the box identified himself as a servant of the imperial palace. So would such a man give him something strange? Ariel asks if her brother asked the man what he was doing in the south. Miliad doesn't understand why his sister is so suspicious of this man. Maybe he just went on vacation and nothing more. She sends him to his room to sleep, afraid to imagine what Abyssian would do to him if she saw him wandering the halls at night. Ariel still finds it strange that the Emperor's servant has come to such a distant place. Ariel, with a plaid on her shoulders, continues to stroll the estate's nighttime corridors. As she approaches her room, she notices Prince Siegfried. She asks him what he is doing here at this late hour and invites him into the room. Ariel walks into the room and waits for the prince to pass, but he doesn't seem to be going past that threshold. The prince replies to Ariel that if he goes into her room so late, what will other people think? Ariel understands why he refuses. His Majesty is not yet of age. The prince frowns and reminds her that it's only temporary. She asks Siegfried why he can't sleep. The prince tells her that he saw her in the window walking around the grounds and thought something was troubling him. Ariel explains that she couldn't sleep thinking about how much work is now in the vineyards. The atmosphere became gloomy. The prince became a little gloomy. Ariel realizes that she has said the wrong thing and covers her mouth with both hands in horror, thinking that she needs to change the subject. The girl notices that the prince is crossing the threshold of her room and is almost in. Siegfried tells Ariel in a serious tone that from now on he will no longer be a stranger in her life. Ariel explains to the prince that in order to make the first step in their relationship, he must wait until he is at least 20 years old. She realizes that she has fallen into his trap. Siegfried approaches to face Ariel and asks if she too is looking forward to his coming of age. Looking at Ariel with eyes burning with happiness reminds her that even in the illusion of the sirens she saw his adult image. Ariel adds that in his vision it was the opposite of her. The prince replies that it's only natural. He is waiting for the image of the illusion where Ariel is waiting for him. The girl replies that this is all well and good, but that she should wait at least a little longer, and asks him not to worry, because she will wait for him. Siegfried looks thoughtfully away and tells her that when they meet again, he will give her something more expensive and beautiful. And with clenched hands, he makes a promise that he will never let it burn and will not allow any more innocent victims. Ariel replies that they will return the vineyards of court to their former glory, nor when His Majesty Prince Siegfried goes east, she will wait for him and look after the farm. Suddenly a thought crossed her mind. This was a work in which she was reborn in the romance genre. Along with the protagonist, the main female character must appear. In her flashbacks, the protagonist falls in love with Siegfried. When Siegfried returns in 5 years, she tells him that she no longer loves him. Ariel doesn't want to believe it. She thinks it can't happen, and not even in a year, but in 5 years. Siegfried asks Ariel not to look at other men, especially she such as her acquaintance Manuel. Later, Ariel notices that the whole house seems to be vibrating. The prince wonders what is going on here. They decide to go out into the hallway to reconnoiter. Some of the maids have also gathered at the noise. Ariel notices some sort of red light, the wall of one of the rooms flying apart in large pieces in different directions. A table standing in the hallway falls to the floor, dropping a burning candle on the carpet. A huge dragon with red eyes and horns on its head emerges from the ruined wall with its mouth wide open. The prince, Ariel, and the maid look with horror at the monster who has appeared in their estate and ruins everything. Ariel is approached by her brother Miliad, who is terrified. He tells her that the red box contains a stone that summons monsters. Siegfried asks Miliad to tell Count Abyssian that a monster has appeared here, and they need urgent help as there is no time. The building could collapse at any moment. Miliad has realized his task and immediately sets out to find his older brother. Siegfried turns to Ariel and asks her if she keeps weapons in her room. She confirms that they are indeed there. Ariel goes to fetch the weapon and tells the prince that she will be back soon, and asks him to try to withstand the dragon's attack. The monster continues to destroy the building with every step it takes. The prince turns around and sees a pile of debris from the wall and other things. He comes to think that to buy time he needs protection. Siegfried grabs one of the wooden sticks from Paul and begins to defend himself with it against the monster. The prince is thrown back a few meters. He lands on his knees without letting go of the stick. He has to hold out until Ariel returns, because he thinks that if you can't fight, you have to twist and turn. A frightened maid creeps up from behind the prince, looking at the monster and asking the prince to save her. Siegfried tells her to run away, for if she stays where she is, she will die. The dragon decides to reconcile his tail, slapping it with all his might on the floor next to the prince, sheltering the maid with his body. The prince looks up and notices Ariel running to their aid with a weapon in her hand. She walks up to the monster and wounds it with her long sword. Blood begins to flow from its neck, then turns to the prince and asks him if he's all right. Without waiting for an answer, Ariel throws a second sword at the prince so that he can kill the monster. Siegfried grabs the sword with one hand and pulls it out of the red gilded sheath. Drawing his sword, he gives the dragon another wound, cutting through its thick scales, and sits down on his knees, setting the weapon aside. The prince gets up off the floor and continues to try to kill the horned monster. But no matter how many blows he throws, the dragon does not die. He looks at the prince with his big red eyes and smiles sinisterly, showing all his teeth. At this time, Count Abyssian and an army of knights from Eliprit's manor come to the aid of the prince and Ariel. The count asks Siegfried worriedly if he is all right. The prince replies that he is fine, and now the most important task is to get rid of these monsters, as they must not be allowed to inflict more damage on the estate. Abyssian agrees with the prince and orders his knights to chain the monster so it can't move. Having carried out the order, they tied thick iron chains around the dragon's head, all paws and tail immobilizing it. Prince Siegfried then jumps high up with his sword and pierces the thick scales of the dragon's neck. In pain, the dragon throws the prince off of him, kicking in pain and bleeding. Then with a rumble falls dead to the floor with his mouth wide open, all rejoicing that the monster was defeated.